Well, hello there. Oh, wait, what's this gonna do? Oh, that's all it was gonna do. I'm Clairville Calico, and today we're playing Chaos Child. Uh-oh, I messed something up on my screen. Hold on. Well, I messed it up more? Uh... Oops. Okay, well, it'll be fine, I'm sure. Oh, yeah, last time. Oh, what happened last time? Oh, yeah. I forget her name, but she died. Yeah, so like the next uh the next murder was gonna happen on some day in October, and oh, that's why it's so dark. My light's off. Oops. uh oh yeah, it was like, so then we waited until I'm so little. Oh yeah, but I keep getting distracted. We waited until midnight for so that to make sure that we weren't the ones that got murdered. And then we made it, but somebody else got murdered that night. They were on fire. They burned, and then that's probably where we left off, I hope. I think that sounds right. We'll see. Yes. Mm-hmm. It was after school in the club room, and the twilight streamed in through the open windows. Is it quiet? Or wait, no, I think it's just quiet on my side. Kazuki was in the corner playing Isa 2 and making weird noises. Her battle didn't seem to be going well, and she was making oddly sexy noises. I hope no one outside the room got the wrong idea. I heard a small knock on the door. Who is it?
ってお前もか。こそこそ覗いてないでさっさと入ってこいって。
大丈夫？お邪魔じゃない？
だから何がお邪魔なんだよ。
廊下の向こうまで聞こえてるよ、花ちゃん。
今忙しいから話しかけるなってさ。
たくすごいね。花ちゃん検定があればすぐに1級とか取れるね。
そんなもんいらん。
私のことなんてどうでもいいのねって怒ってるぞ。
違う。私のこと勝手に話題にすんなだ。
すごい。
Serika smiled and clapped. For some reason, she was really happy.
あれ、今日なんちゃんは？
生徒会、しばらく休んでたから仕事が溜まってるらしい。
川原のやつが来て、今日は新聞部には渡さないとさ。
おお、これは争奪戦だね。よーし、タク、のんちゃんを奪いに行こう。
いや、いいよ。
I don't want any more trouble with the Student Council, or Kawahara, more specifically.
うわぁ、久しぶりにダメなタクに戻った。せっかくかっこよかったのに。
How long of a while? Just a little while?
なんだそれ。
だってあんな怖い能力を使う人と対決したり、病院の地下へ潜入したり、とにかく事件を追ってるタクはかっこよかったよ。
Aha, so I should follow more cases, huh? Kurisu got super mad at me and told me not to go chasing after danger, though. But now, that all seemed like a distant past. Even though it hadn't even been a week.
本当に事件はもう終わったんだよな。
It's all over. Oh yeah, but like, not everybody knows that the murder happened. So they think that the murders are done, but they're not. That night, the 23rd, when there had been no murder, the rest of the world had started to declare that the return of the new generation madness was over. But I still hadn't believed it then. I thought that it wasn't over at all. The next day, I heard shocking news from Shinjo. Senri Minamisawa, the woman who'd threatened us so much, was found burnt to death in her condo.
センリが。
うん。僕も有村の映像を確認した。間違いない。
I spent a long time thinking that night. But in the end, I had no choice but to tell Kurisu about her death. When I told her, her eyes went wide, and then she looked down silently. Her long hair hid her face, and I couldn't see her expression.
なんて言っていいかわからないけど、
これで。
Uh-huh.
これで終わったのね。もうタクルやユイを襲うような犯人はいなくなったのね。
Probably.
だと思うって新庄さんが。
そう。よかった。
For some reason, I thought she was gonna say goo. Goo. She raised her head. Her eyes were a little wet, but she was quietly smiling. Aren't eyes always wet? Are they made of water? There's water in there, I'm sure, right? I don't know. The police still hadn't made any announcement about a suspect in the killings being burnt to death. Not only was Senri Minamisawa a minor, but she may have been driven to the crime by Chaos Child Syndrome, the form of PTSD experienced by young survivors of the Shibuya earthquake. Shinjo had said it was an extremely delicate matter, and since the circumstances of her death were so strange, the forensics people were getting nowhere. There was an internal war over how the police should release the information.
これは邪推かもしれないけど。
It seemed to me that the fact that she was a human test subject at AH Tokyo General Hospital might have played a role too. If she became famous, the media and internet might start looking into her past. And they might find out about the human experiments. It would make sense if somebody wanted to avoid that was putting pressure on the police.
おい、宮代?
Here. Yeah.
悪い。なんだ？
あれどうするよ。
With what? Ito pointed to the map on the wall.
片付けるか？もう使わないかもしれないし。
Mm-hmm. I stood in front of it again. The map was crammed with all the information we'd gathered so far. It all looked faded, like something had happened a long time ago.
ああ、そうか。
I found 2 photographs on the map that I'd completely forgotten about. The 6th and 7th incident in the New Generation Madness, a yummy hand, and a Daikun puzzle. The notes next to them read October 28th and November 4th.
今日って28日なんだよな。
そうだな。
Ito nodded. He seemed to know what I meant. Then I saw another note I stuck up there in my own handwriting. It was one I'd been thinking about ever since I was told about Senri Minamisawa's death. Serial killer equals multiple people, including pyrokinetic.
事件は終わったんだろうか。本当に。
終わったって言ってるぜ、みんな。それにさ、もし他に犯人がいるなら、23日だって南沢千里に代わってそいつが事件を起こしたはずだろ。
ああ、なるほど。
けど実際は何も起こらなかった。ってことはこの可能性は消えたってことじゃないのかな。
Ito took the note off the map.
もうやめようぜ。なんつうかさ、副部長が辛いと思うんだ、俺。
うん、そうだね。しんちゃんの言う通りかも。
ね。
そっか。
I remembered Kurisu's sad eyes when I told her about Senri Minamisawa's death.
わかった。こいつの役目はここで終わりにしよう。
I slowly removed the map. Very
けど、
slowly.
なんかいきなり壁がすっきりしちゃったね。
It took me 3 hours to take that map down.
ずっとここにあったからな。
ねえ、また何か事件を探そうよ、タク。みんなをあっと驚かせるような事件。
ああ、そのために作った新聞部だもんな。
Sarika smiled again, the same way she always did. And Ito finally started to grin too.
今度は副部長に怒られない程度の事件にしとこうぜ。
わかってるよ。今回の件でさすがに懲りた。
Even Kazuki turned away from the game and gave an in agreement. Bum bum bum. We're at our home. That night, I finally went back to the RV. Yui had finally calmed down and stopped being afraid at night. If Dad, Kurisu, and Yuto were there, she'd probably be fine. Her old friend Uki was there too.
やっぱりここは落ち着くな。
I sat in the chair and booted up my PC for the first time in a long while. My inbox was overflowing with spam. It was strange. It always used to annoy me, but now it felt like proof I'd returned to my old life.
はい、ご苦労。
Of course, I deleted them all immediately, but they didn't piss me off like they used to.
さて
Come to think of it, I'd forgotten because of everything that happened, but Again had just sold me the last edition of Cool Cat Press, and I hadn't even touched it at all. I took it out from its hiding spot under my desk and started to flip through the pages. It felt like forever since I've done that too.
1ヶ月目の恋人はどこまで許される？フレンチキス、それともディープキスまで OK？
ふーむ。
You're thinking with them, huh?
なあ、尾上、お前はどう思う？てか、うわっ！
I almost fell out of my chair. Sarika was standing behind me, looking over my shoulder.
私としては1ヶ月とかあんまり関係ないと思うんだよね。
いやいやいや、そんなことよりお前いつの間に。
えへへ、ドアの鍵かかってなかったから。
Crap! I'd been so busy reading that I hadn't noticed Sarika.
だからって勝手に入ってくんな。ノックくらいしろよ。
でもノックは嫌かなと思って。
え？
タク怖がるかなって。
What's scarier, someone walking into your house or someone knocking on the door? She was right. If I heard knocking now, it might be bad for my heart. She might look like an airhead, but the nice thing about Sarika was that you could always count on her to remember things like that.
いいか、繰り返すようだが、この本はいつもゲンさんに押し売りされてるんだ。僕が好んで買ってるわけじゃないからな。そのあたり勘違いするなよ。
Yeah, okay. I put my Cool Cat Press back under the desk in a very cool manner.
了解。のんちゃんには秘密にしとくね。
こら待て、僕はそういうこと言ってるんじゃないからな。
それでタクはどうなの？
何が？
だからキスはどこまで OK？
なんもしたこともないのにわかるか。
Sarika suddenly pressed her lips unhappily.
タクってば忘れちゃったの？
何をだ？
私としたのに、そのファーストキス。
何
？I literally leapt out of my chair. I kissed Sarika? When? Where? How? Why? According to Kenji Minamikata's column in Cool Cat Press, a girl's first kiss was more important than losing her virginity. And that's why a guy who didn't remember his first kiss was a terrible man, he said.
まずい。
I was sweating, unable to remember a thing, but Sarika just laughed.
まあ許してあげるよ。幼稚園の頃の話だし。
ってそんな昔の話かよ。びっくりさせんな。
Anyway, kisses in preschool didn't count. Probably. But when I told her so, Sarika looked upset again.
それより何しに来たんだ？家に帰ったんじゃないのか？
そうなんだけど、なんか少し寂しくなっちゃって、タクの顔を見に来たの。
は？
ほら、最近ずっとみんなで一緒にいたでしょ？もちろん怖い人に狙われたのはすごく嫌だったけど、それも仲間同士で助け合って乗り越えたって感じで。 こういうこと言うとのんちゃんに怒られると思うから内緒だけど、私結構ドキドキしたよ。
そっか。
タクはどうだった？
僕か。僕はどうだろう、わからないな。
ふーん。
She suddenly leaned over, right on top of me, and reached a hand toward my computer. The sensation on my back was soft and warm. I didn't know how to react whenever she did something like this.
おい、重いからどけって。
重くないよ。失礼だな、君は。
Her white fingers gripped the mouse, and she started to move it
部
around.
室でも言ったけど、私また新しい事件を探したいな。あ、これなんかどう？
Sarika opened a site for explorers of abandoned buildings, a popular genre. Most of the articles were about people going into abandoned villages, factories, and mines. Bankrupt, empty amusement parks and department stores were also popular. They would write essays and upload photos. Some sites would also write about bloody urban legends involving the abandoned buildings, or upload photographs with ghosts in them.
こういうのはやり尽くされてるしな。あと廃墟への侵入って非合法だから、学校の部活でやるのは無理だと思う。
つまんないの。
Sarika moved away from me, and then lay down on the RV's bed. Then she yawned
ほら、
loudly.
そこで寝るなよ。
I turned around, and her eyelids were already closed. She's already asleep. I quickly stood up and shook her shoulders.
おい、眠いんなら帰って寝ろよ。
今日は泊まってくからいい。
何言ってんだ。僕の寝る場所がなくなるだろ。
On the floor.
大丈夫。私小さいからベッドで一緒に寝られるよ。
そんなわけいくか。
Just as I grabbed her by the arm and tried to lift her up, my phone started to vibrate in my back pocket. Or backpack. It kept going, so it probably wasn't an email or a text, but a phone call. I had no choice but to leave Sarika on the bed while I went to answer it. I looked at the screen and saw the call was from Ito.
今頃なんだろう。新しい事件のネタでも見つけたのか。
I answered the phone.
もしもし。どうした伊藤。
アットちゃん見たか？
His voice was tense and anxious.
アットチャンネル？
とにかく見てみろ。ニュージェネ関連のスレならどこでもいい。
なんだよ一体。
I walked over to my PC, confused, and opened At Channel. I decided to start by opening the news board. I don't know why I read it like that. There were quite a few threads about original and current New Generation Madness incidences. Huh? I couldn't believe my eyes. The page was filled with the names Senri Minamisawa and Riko Haida. And I could see the words, burnt to death, here and there too.
警察が犯人を公表したのか？
違う。読んでみるとわかるが、どっかから情報が漏れたらしい。
情報が漏れた。
I opened a thread and saw that, yes, the police were still remaining silent. Tiny words. Wait, can I make this any bigger? No. On the afternoon of 10/24, a temp worker named Riko Haida, 18, was found burnt to death inside her condo in Shibuya Ward. It was reported that she burned herself to death in a suicide after having trouble at work. But sources close to investigations say that she was suspect in the return of the New Generation Madness case. The police are considering the possibility that Riko Haida was a false name and are trying to determine her real identity. However, her body is badly damaged and she is and the investigation is proceeding slowly. Yes. But there was pictures. But there was the picture Arimura and I had seen on her, the security camera, and the photo of her when she was a student. And there was a ton of weird information on Senri Minamisawa, with no source even given. Some of it said,
おい、なんだよこれ。
So Riko Haida is a fake name? We're sure the killer's Senri Minamisawa? Somebody let me know. The guys on Crazy Girls are starting to track her down. By the way, this is security camera footage of what we think Senri Minamisawa. This is an old photo.
見つけたか?
Wow.
情報弱者どもがろくに確かめもしないで何適当なこと書き込んでんだ。
I was angry because I saw Kurisu and Kawihara's names mixed in with the information on Senri Minamisawa. The first idiot who posted this, probably an old classmate of theirs. The three of them were friends and always together. That information had nothing to do with the case. What were they thinking? And the irresponsible comments that came after were even worse. Another thread said that Minamisawa had once lived in Aoba dorm, and that Kurisu visited her every day in her condo. That was crazy! There were even a few morons saying that Kurisu was an accomplice to the murders because she'd helped Senri Minamisawa stay hidden, and that the police were coming to arrest her. That was probably why her phone had been shut. I can read. That was probably why her phone number had shown up on an interview site.
ふざけるなよ。
When I saw that Kurisu's graduation photo was uploaded along with Senri's, I slammed my fist down onto the desk.
試験がやっと終わったっていうのに、何なんだよこれ。
どうしたの、タク?
Surika jumped up when she heard me yell.
キルソイとクルスに電話してみる。
いや、俺も電話してみたがダメだった。副部長は電源を切ってる。
I hit my computer's power button and quickly headed for the door.
わかった。直接アワリを言ってみる。
ああ、俺も行く。向こうで落ち合おう。
Beep, beep. Ito hung up as well.
尾上、悪いがちょっと留守番しててくれ。
やだよ。のんちゃんに何かあったんでしょ。私も連れてって。
Serika followed me as I ran out the door. I didn't have a choice, so the two of us ran toward Aoba dorm. There were already several strange vans parked outside the dorm when we got there. Some people were already wandering around outside with video cameras.
すごみめ、もう来てんのか。いい加減にしろよ。
As I got close to Aoba dorm, I could feel several sets of eyes upon
ね
me.
え、ちょっといいかな。君らはもしかしてここの子？
No. Several men who appeared to be reporters started to surround us.
はい。何がですか。
だからここに住んでる子？
違います。すみません。通してください。
じゃあ友達かな。クルスノノって子知ってる？
知りません。
Never heard of her. Hold on. I decided to lie. If I told them I knew Kurisu, I figured I wouldn't be able to take another step.
それじゃあさ、南沢千里っていう名前に心当たりはないかな。
ネットで見なかった。例の猟奇殺人の犯人らしいんだけどね。
だからほんと知らないです。僕たち青葉院に薬をもらいに来ただけですから。
Then I grabbed Serika's hand and started to run. Ran right through the door. I shook off the hands that tried to grab at me and rang the bell for Aoba Clinic, not Aoba Dorm. I could hear several frustrated noises behind me. Maybe it was just because the police hadn't made their announcement yet, but even the media didn't seem to want to step on the clinic's property. It would probably be considered trespassing. Soon I heard someone on the other side of the door.
僕だよ。尾上もいる。
I whispered and the door opened. It was the password. I slid inside and the door was quickly closed again.
よ、おかえり。
Dad was standing in the front lobby, chuckling.
こんばんは、佐久間先生。なんか大変ですね。
まあな、こんなのは初めてだからどうしていいのやら。
Dad scratched the back of his head.
クルスはどうしてる？
意外と言っちゃかわいそうだが、割と塞ぎ込んでる。あいつにしては珍しい。
I'd figured that Kurisu was like any other girl. She was either scared or depressed after what happened. But it hurt to hear that a strong-willed girl like her was down.
早く言ってやれ。タクルたちの顔を見れば少しは元気になるだろう。
はい。
Sarika and I ran up the stairs to the dorm. I could see her sitting on the dining table with her head drooping down. And past her, hiding in the kitchen, Yui and Yuto were looking on worried. There was a cold cup of English breakfast tea on the table, and Uki was pacing around wondering if she should make a new one.
ただいま。
こんばんは。
They all looked relieved to see me.
タクルにセリカさん、よかった来てくれて。
ああ。
I waved to Yui a little, then tried to talk to Kurisu.
大丈夫かクルス。
Kurisu slowly looked up as if she'd only just now realized we were here. Her tone made it obvious that she was trying to hide her shock.
心配してきてくれたの？ありがとう。
ああ、伊藤も来るってさ。
そう。そんなところに立ってないで座ったら。
そうだな。
Sarika and I sat across from her. Uki quickly brought us some tea.
クルスさん、お茶新しくしましょうか。いいわ。ありがとう。
Some raspberry tea. Kurisu smiled and politely refused. Uki looked a little sad.
なあクルス。あんまり気にすんなよ。アットチャンネルなんて秋っぽいやつらばっかりだ。人の噂も75日とか言うけど、75日も持たない。多分1ヶ月もしないうちにみんな忘れると思う。だから、その間だけちょっと我慢すれば。
私のことはいいの。何を言われても別に構わないわ。でも、私の大切な人たちや大切な家に迷惑がかかるのが許せない。
Her voice was shaking with sorrow. Yui and Yuto ran out from the kitchen and grabbed onto her from both sides.
ののね、平気だよ。私なら全然平気。僕も大丈夫だから。ゆうと。でも学校でいじめられたりしたら。そんなの気にならないよ。っていうか、ゆうをいじめるようなやつがいたら、私がただじゃおかないから。
Kurisu's eyes were wet with tears.
ごめんね。どうしてのの姉が謝るの？何も悪いことしてないのに。そうだよ。謝ることないよ、のんちゃん。
Everybody rushed to defend her. But that only seemed to make it worse. Looking at her made me feel angry. Where had the information leaked from? And why would information come out that made her look like an accomplice just because she was an old friend of a serial killer? It didn't make sense. It was crazy. And then I realized something was wrong. I'd been so shocked by what had happened that I hadn't had time to think about it, but...
なんかおかしくないか。
That channel was always looking for a new target to make a fuss over, and Senri Mini Misao fit the bill perfectly. But there really been enough time. Oh wait, I figured out. I read it wrong. Hold on. But had there really been enough time for them to start focusing on Kurisu and Alba Dorm? Even for at channel, that was weird.
まるで誰かがそう仕向けてるような。
We've been set up. As soon as I had the thought, I froze. Someone set this up. Were they after Kurisu? Or maybe Aoba Dorm?
それってどういうことだ？
Who would do that and for what? What could they gain by going after Kurisu or Alba Dorm?
くそ、全然わからない。
I took the phone out of my pocket and dialed a
ど
number.
こ
Just one. One
ど
number.
うしたの
It was the number 3. Yeah. Everybody looked at me, surprised. I motioned for them to be quiet and stood still. Oh, stood up. Oh my goodness. I can read. I needed to move somewhere I wouldn't be overheard, so as not to worry Kurisu more. I hurried to my room. Oh, I hurried to my own room, then focused on the sound of the ringing phone.
早く出てくれよ。早く。
After a long time, there was finally an answer.
ああ、宮代君ちょうどよかった。今電話しようと。
Shinjo was in just as much of a hurry as I was. I cut him off and
ど
yelled,
うしておかしな情報が漏れてるんです？
ネットの件か。今、サイバー対策課が調べてる。もう少し待ってくれ。それより、
警察から漏洩したんじゃないんですか？
それも含めて今調査中だ。
Shinjo sounded a little upset. He probably didn't want to think that any of his colleagues had leaked important information.
それより、君は今どこにいる？
青葉寮ですけど。
ちょうどよかった。いいか、よく聞け。これは君たちの命に関わる重大な話だ。
え？
Our lives were in danger?
俺も君たちも大変な勘違いをしていたんだ。皮肉な話だが、ネットに情報が漏れたおかげで判明した。
A mistake?
君や有村さんを襲ったパイロキネシスト。あれは
Mhm.
南沢千里じゃなかった。
Oh.
Huh?
My eyes went wide as I stood there in shock. My grip on my phone on my phone tightened.
南沢千里じゃなかった。
Then who was it?
じゃあ誰なんです？
Hey, I said that.
灰田理子だ。
はあ？それって偽名じゃ。
そう。俺たちは灰田理子というのが偽名で、偽の身元だとばかり思っていた。でも、ネット上に彼女を実際に知っているという情報がいくつも書き込まれているのを見つけたんだ。最初はただのデマだと思ったんだが、一応その書き込みをもとに彼女の故郷と言われる場所を地元警察に洗ってもらった。その結果、灰田理子の実在が確認された。
そんな。
マンションで見つかった焼死体の歯の治療痕も地元の歯科医の記録と完全に一致した。間違いない。俺たちが南沢千里だと決めつけていたパイロキネシストは灰田理子という全くの別人だったんだよ。
Wait. Then who's Senri?
ちょ
I guess
ちょ
somebody
っと待
else.
ってください。
I moved the phone away from my ear so I could think for a second.
見つけた。
Hmm. That woman wasn't Senri Minamisawa? Then, did the real Minamisawa die in the Shibuya earthquake like Kurisu said?
それならどうして僕は狙われたんだ？
I've never known a woman named Riko Haida. I'd never met her or even heard her name before. I couldn't think of any reason why she'd come after me. What was she doing with Senri Minamisawa's ID card then? I couldn't think straight. I kept coming up with new questions.
宮代君、聞いてるか？
はい。
put the phone back to my ear. Then I heard a panic in his voice.
さっきハイダリコの検視結果がようやく出た。死亡推定時刻は10月23日の未明から昼頃にかけてだ。
10月23日？
そうだ。その時間帯に彼女はすでに死んでいた。
でも23日の夜、僕はカフェで襲われたんですよ。
これは久野里さんの説だが、君を襲ったのはハイダリコ本人じゃない。多分別の能力者がハイダリコの妄想を君に見せただけだ。それしか説明がつかない。
別の能力者？
I felt a cold, sticky sweat on my forehead. Another psychic? I suspected it many times, but in the end I discarded the possibility. That's why I thought this was all over.
ハイダリコの頭部はかなり損壊していて、すぐにわからなかったんだが、脳に肥大化の痕跡が発見された。猟奇殺人の他の被害者と全く同じだ。おそらく彼女は思考を操られ、自分で自分を串刺しにした挙句、さらに自身の体を燃やしたんだ。この異常な手口も他の被害者と共通している。
じゃあ真犯人は10月23日に能力者であるハイダリコを惨殺したということになる。
そうだ。スケジュール通りにな。
ってことは。
I was too scared to say what came next. Ah, and we took the map down. We need to put it back up. Took 3 hours to take down. Take 6 hours to put back up, I'm sure. Shinjo said it for me.
ニュージェネの狂気の再来は23日で途切れてなんかいなかったんだ。事件はまだ続いている。
There's more to come. Today was October 28th. If the murders weren't over...
気をつけろ、宮代君。多分誰かが狙われてる。
I felt like every hair on my body was standing up on end. I imagined a hand reaching out from somewhere and putting a cold blade to my neck.
新庄さん、僕たちどうしたら。
とにかく一人になるな。君のところに今後輩を向かわせてる。俺は有村さんの家へ行って彼女を保護する。その足で君らのところへ向かうから。いいね。
はい、お願いします。
Beep. I hung up, jammed the phone into my pocket, and ran out of the room. My legs were trembling and I almost tripped several times. When I got to the dining room, Kurisu and Sarika were folding everyone's laundry.
何かしていないとつい悪いことばかり考えてしまって。
Kurisu forced herself to smile as she looked at me. But she must have seen the look on my face because her smile faded instantly.
どうかしたの？タク？
ユイたちはどうした？
I couldn't see Yui, Yuto, or Uki.
ウキちゃんと一緒に佐久間先生のお手伝い。今日はもう委員を閉めるんでお掃除をしに下へ行ったよ。
そっか。
Dad had probably figured that with all the media outside, he wouldn't get any work done today. So he must have decided to close up early. I looked at the curtain and saw that the street was filled with vans. None of them showed any sign of leaving. But whether this was fair or not, even though I'd hated them a moment ago, I now felt glad they were there. With this many people, no matter who they were, the killer wouldn't be able to get at us easily. I went I went to close the curtain and saw that there was some kind of commotion going on outside. The window glass was too thick for me to hear, but something must have happened while I was on the phone. What's going on out there?
尾上、クルスのこと頼む。何があっても絶対にそばを離れないでやってくれ。絶対にだぞ。
ねえタクル、何かあったのなら教えて。
後でちゃんと話すから。とにかく任せたぞ、尾上。
オッケー。
These two weren't psychics, so they were probably safe, but it was best to be sure. I ran down the stairs to the clinic. I could see Uki and Yuto cleaning up the equipment in the exam room.
父さんとユイは
父さん、外でマスコミの人と喧嘩してる。
喧嘩？
Punching them.
はい。医院の窓から中を隠し撮りしようとした人がいたんです。それで佐久間先生が怒って外へ。
Yeah. I listened carefully, and sure enough, I could hear Dad arguing with what sounded like a reporter.
ユイも父さんと一緒なのか？
お姉ちゃん？
Yuto and Uki looked confused.
お姉ちゃんならさっきタクル兄ちゃんのところへ行ったでしょ？
何？
Yui went to find me?
いや、来てないぞ。
でも確かに寮へ上がっていきました。
そんなバカな。
Then where is she? Is she also outside fighting the news people? I turned around and ran back up the stairs to the dorm. Not there, not there.
ユイ！どこだ、ユイ！
But I couldn't find her no matter where I looked. She wasn't in her room, or the bath, or the toilet. I looked everywhere. After I looked everywhere I could find, I finally decided to check the dorm's emergency exit and shivered as I saw that the inside latch was undone.
いつもきちんと鍵がかかってるはずなのに。
Did she go outside? Why? I could feel my heart pounding with terror as I ran back into the clinic.
やっぱりどこにもいない。
そんなはずないよ。さっき伊藤さんが来て。
伊藤？
はい。それでゆいさんは伊藤さんと上へ行ったんです。
伊藤と一緒なんだな。ユイ一人じゃなくて。
はい。
そうか。
I breathed a small sigh of relief. If it was just Yui, she might have been in danger. But if she wasn't alone, it wouldn't be as easy for someone to attack
と
her.
にかく伊藤に電話してみる。
As I took out my phone, Serika and Kurisu came into the room. They were worried. They looked even more worried when I told them that Ito and Yui had vanished.
ゆいと伊藤くんがどこ行っちゃったんだろ
もしもし、伊藤が。
ああ、宮代。
お前どこにいるんだ？
どこってコンビニから帰るところだよ。買い出ししてきたんだ。
Ito's voice was the same as ever.
ユイは一緒なのか？
そばにいるけど。
そうか。
I felt relieved, but screamed into the phone anyway.
お前な、コンビニに行くなら誰かに断ってからにしろよ。ユイまで連れ出してみんな心配してんだぞ。
確かにそうだったな。悪い悪い。
とにかく急いで戻ってきてくれ。ユイが危険かもしれないんだ。
それなら大丈夫だろう。ゆいちゃんに何かあったら 俺が手術して治してやるからさ。
Wait, what? An opera. Okay.
Huh?
Yeah. My mouth hung open for a second. An operation? What the hell was he talking about?
Huh?
Wait. And then I realized I could hear muffled moans next to him.
おい、伊藤、今のユイの声じゃないのか？何やってんだ？
あのさ、俺いつか佐久間先生みたいな医者になろうと思ってたんだよな。知ってたか？
だから何してんだよお前。
やっぱコンビニで買ったナイフじゃ切れ味が悪いな。確かに痛いだろう、これじゃ。
おい伊藤、何冗談言ってんだ。ユイを電話に出せ。おい
宮代、お前さ、急いで持ってきてくれないか？ちゃんと切れるメスと麻酔薬。あ
What?
と骨を切るノコギリみたいなのなかったっけ？これじゃゆいちゃんがかわいそうだ。
Wait, what is he doing? He hung up.
ユイ、ユイ、どうしたんだユイ。
I pushed the call button again and again with shaking fingers. But he must have turned off his phone because he didn't pick up.
なんだよ。どうして伊藤が。
My mind couldn't keep up with this. It was too much to believe.
タクル、ユイがどうかしたの？なんか悲鳴みたいなの聞こえたけど。タクル兄ちゃん。
I suddenly felt like I was about to throw up. I shoved my face into the sink and tossed up everything I had in my stomach. It was like I was vomiting up hate, fear, and despair. And no matter how much I tried, it wouldn't stop.
大丈夫タクル。
When I'd thrown up so much that there wasn't even any stomach fluid left, I turned around to see Kurisu behind me.
クルス、電話だ。新庄さんにとにかく電話してくれ。え？このままじゃユイが殺される。
Meow. I let Kurisu handle getting in touch with Shinjo and ran out the emergency exit to the dorm.
ユイ、どこだ？何でもいいから声を出せ、ユイ。
My voice echoed down the rows of houses. Some nearby reporters ran
どうしたの
over.
君？
Get out of
何
here.
かあったのかい？
さっきここから誰か出て行きませんでしたか？
え？
僕くらいの男と、あともう少し若い女の子です。知りませんか？
あの二人かな。インタビューしようとしたら無視されたけど。
どっちへ行きました？
確かあっちだと思うけど。
What's that way? I can't see where you're pointing. Just kidding. I ran in the direction he pointed without stopping or looking behind me. I could hear them asking what happened, but I didn't have time to tell them.
ユイ、
I ran screaming the names of my little sister and best friend. It hurt to breathe, but I couldn't stop running. My only thoughts as I ran were of Yui's safety and Ito's strange behavior. His tone had been the same as ever. It was the exact same tone he used when he was laughing about the latest weird school gossip. So why would he do that to Yui? It had to be some kind of mistake, because Ito wouldn't.
もし他に犯人がいるなら23日だって南沢千里に代わってそいつが事件を起こしたはずだろ。けど実際は何も起こらなかったってことはこの可能性は消えたってことじゃないのかな。もうやめ
I
ようぜ。
remember when this happened.
なんつうかさ、副部長が辛いと思うんだ。俺。
僕が別の能力者の可能性を完全に排除してしまったのはあの時だ。伊藤はクリスのことを引き合いに出して僕に考える間も与えずに重大なメモを剥がして捨てた。
He was
それじゃあれはわざと。
covering himself up. But the more I thought about it, the more unbelievable it seemed. How long had I been running? My throat was dry and it stung. I was gasping for breath and in dire need of water. Sweat was dripping off of me and I was so out of breath that I couldn't think.
どこだ。
I looked around and saw that I was in a residential area of Shibuya that the reconstruction teams hadn't gotten around to yet. There was still a lot of abandoned houses. Even during the day, there was a little foot traffic, and there were always rumors that at night you could see the vengeful ghosts of people who died in the quake wandering beneath the streetlights. It wasn't that far from Aoba Dorm, which meant that during my search, I must have circled back without knowing it. Just as I was about to turn around, my head for... Oh! Just as I was about to turn around and head for Mayashita Park, or Heiko Academy, I heard a faint sound. A tiny noise, like tearing cloth. I thought I might have imagined it, but forced my aching legs forward to look in the alleyway where I heard it. The lights didn't reach into the alley, so I could see nothing but darkness. I could hear the sound of water going drip, drip, drip. Someone's house's pipe must have broken. I took another step forward into the darkness, as if I was being drawn by the sound. Suddenly, there were several sharp metallic clangs at my feet. I quickly jumped back, surprised. When my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw they were paring knives, and all of them were stained dark with something, their blades bent or broken in places. These knives I bought at the convenience store doesn't really cut that well. I felt cold crawl up my back as I remembered Ito's words.
おい、ユイ、いるのか、ユイ。
I took another step forward. There was what felt like a puddle of water at my feet, and I heard a splash. But there was no answer. I took another step forward. The splash got louder. And then I realized the liquid was sticking to my shoe. I looked down and saw that my shoe was stained in the same dark red color as the knives. The wind must have changed course because the moment I had thought, I smelled something awful. I inhaled a full breath of the stench before I could cover my nose and mouth. And then I looked toward the source of the smell. And when my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see it. Oh my... It was the unpleasant smell, but somehow seductive and sweet smell of meat. I could see small boxes laid out in the rough shape of a human body. It looked like some kind of grotesque homemade doll. The dark red liquid... Hold on. I can do this. The dark red liquid was flowing from the boxes. I suddenly felt an urge to throw up. How long did it take me to realize that I was staring at what was left of my little sister? Because of that, it took me a little while to notice the man further down the alley, staring at the pool of blood. He was holding the murder weapon in his hand. It was dripping with blood. Uh-oh. Ito hopped over what used to be Yui and spoke to me in the same unpleasant tone he always used.
どうしてだって？それは俺の方の質問だよな。お前さ、なんであの時助けなかったんだ？
あの時？
なんで見捨てたんだ？
捨てたって誰よ？
誰って。千にはあんなに苦しんでただろうが。
Senri? Senri Minamisawa? Why was he saying her name? Why was Ito talking about Senri?
どうだ、自分の大切なものを失う気分は、自分の無力さを思い知りながら後悔に苛まれる気分は。
I felt nothing but confusion. Or was I looking at, what I was looking at didn't seem real. So I just stood there and stared at Ito's fake, oh my god! Why is it so hard to read? Stared at Ito's face, dumbstruck.
俺にとってかけがえのない存在だった。それをお前は見殺しにしたんだ。でもこれでようやく復讐も終わる。
Ito、お前。
What was the relationship between Senri Minamisawa and Ito? What had happened between them? It didn't look like I'd have time to think about it. Ito's knife got steadily closer to me.
次は宮代の番だ。よく切れるメスと麻酔薬は持ってきたか？
No.
それがなきゃひどく痛くて苦しむぞ。ゆいちゃんみたいにな。
Ito smiled a murder smile. Oh, so that's how it's gonna be. For some reason, I'd lost the capacity to think clearly. That was the only thought that was left. I'm not even going to look. I'm not even going to look like a person when he's done with me. Just like Yui. The feeling overwhelmed me. All I could do was stare into Ito's bloodshot eyes and wait for the moment of my death. And then, I heard what sounded like a scream behind me. It was enough to drag me back to my senses. I looked back and saw Kurisu standing under the streetlight, her shoulders heaving up and down.
伊藤君、何をしているの？
Her eyes went wide as the knife in Ito's hand. Oh, at! Oh my god.
ダメだ。
He'll kill you too! Get away! Get away from here, Kurisu! I wanted to tell her to get away, but only meaningless noises came out of my mouth. It was like my vocal cords had been paralyzed.
答えて、伊藤君。
Kurisu did the exact opposite of what I hoped she would. She ran into the alley, blocking my way out. And at the same time, she noticed the boxes filled with body parts and the stinking pool of blood she gasped.
これ、何？タクル。
I don't know.
ユイはどうしたの？ねえ、ユイは？
I was finally able to speak, but I couldn't answer her question. It was pathetic, but tears started to well up in my eyes. I couldn't stop them. Ito answered for me, flipping the knife from one hand to the other, to another, as he spoke.
ああ、ほら、気をつけなよ、副部長。その箱を一つでも踏みつぶしたら、ゆいちゃんを組み立てられなくなる。
Kurisu jumped back and started to shake as she stared at the boxes.
嘘でしょ。
She sank to her knees and reached out toward what used to be Yui, not caring that she'd be soaked in blood.
こんなの嘘、絶対に嘘。
She picked up something long and thin. It had a pretty nail on it, which it had a pretty nail on it, one which had never been manicured, even though its owner was old enough to be interested in makeup. It was Yui's finger.
だから副部長、勝手に触らないでくれよ。ゆいちゃんが綺麗に見えるよう芸術的に詰めたんだから。
どうして？どうして？
全部宮代が悪いんだよ。南沢千里を苦しめたから。その復讐さ。
千里の復讐？
そうだよ。千里はもっと痛かったろ。苦しかったろ。しかも実験が辛くて死にたいと思っても死ねなかった。ゆいちゃんなんてまだ幸せだよ。こうしてすぐ死ぬことができたんだからね。
When I heard those words, something snapped inside of me. The fog in my head cleared instantly, and my blood started to boil. It was a rage I couldn't control. The next thing I knew, I leapt at Ito with my bare hands. As opposed to gloved hands. He pointed the knife straight at me as if he'd been waiting for this. I could tell it was pointed straight at my neck, at my... I keep wanting to read that as carrot, but I know that's not right. Carotid artery? If I'd been even more calm, I would have known better than to jump on him without any defense. But now I couldn't hold back my anger. Get your sword. I'm gonna stretch real quick. He must have thought he had me because a cruel thin smile formed on Ito's lips. I knew I was going to die. I hoped that Kurisu at least might be able to get away. The last thought that went through my head was... If heaven was real, that was probably where Yui was going. But I knew without a doubt that I was going to hell. So I'd probably never see her again. But the moment of my death never came. Instead, I heard Kurisu scream. It was a violent sound. Like unlike, Like unlike anything I'd ever heard from her before. I looked in surprise and saw that she'd grabbed Ito from the side, and the two of them were rolling on the ground. The two of them were rolling around in Yui's blood. She didn't seem to hear me at all. She screamed like a wounded animal and tried to grab both of Ito's arms from behind. Her whole body was covered with Yui's blood, and each time she moved, her long hair flew up and sent dark red splashes everywhere. Ito tried to shake her off and punched her in the stomach. She moaned in pain, and when the impact hit her where she'd been stabbed before. But she still hung on desperately and refused to let go. I leapt on top of Ito without even thinking. I grabbed the hand with the knife and smashed it into the ground with all my might. Donk. There was a dull snap as his fingers shattered and the knife fell to the ground. I kicked it far away. I put my full weight on Ito's back and pinned him to the ground. No. He was stronger than I thought, and he almost knocked me off, but I refused to let go.
大丈夫か、クルス。
But she didn't seem to be able to answer my question. She sat down on the ground and tried to catch her breath. The shock seemed to have temporarily robbed her of her ability to breathe. Big tears fell from her eyes, and when she finally caught her breath, she started to sob.
副部長、恨むんなら宮代を恨むんだな。あの時こいつが千里を見捨てていなければ、俺だってこんな事件を起こすこともなかった。なあ、宮代。すべての事件の元凶は宮代だったんだ。お前が追いかけてたはずのニュージェネの狂気の再来事件は、実はみんなお前を追い詰めるために俺が起こしてたんだ。そんなことも調べられないで何が情報強者だよ。すげえ滑稽だぜ宮代。
That couldn't be true. People had died because of me? If I had found the truth faster, Yui wouldn't have died.
嘘。
Kurusu's voice was so soft I couldn't hear what she was saying.
クルス。
嘘よ。伊藤君の言ってることはみんなデタラメじゃない。
はあ？
Kurusu jerked her face upward without bothering to hide her tears. She stood up, enraged, and screamed into the sky.
あなたは誰？伊藤君にこんなことをさせて。どこかで私たちを嘲笑っているのは一体誰なの？
クルス。
見てるのは分かってるのよ。私の大切な妹をこんな姿にしたあなたは一体誰？
Something red dripping down off Kurisu's skirt. Was it Yui's blood, or had Kurisu's own injury opened again?
どういうことだ、クルス。
伊藤君は千里のことなんて知らない。誰かにそう思い込まされてるだけ。
はあ？何言ってんだよ。俺は大好きだった千里のために復讐を。
だからそんなの嘘。私は千里と一緒にずっと過ごしてきたのよ。千里はあなたに会ったことなんてない。なのに復讐なんてありえない。
バカなこと言うなよ。俺は千里を愛してたんだ。だから千里のために。
I could tell that Ito's body was starting to shake underneath me. His teeth were chattering as if he was afraid of something.
それも全部デタラメよ。千里はあなたなんて絶対に知らない。だからあなたが千里を愛しているはずがない。
違う。伊藤。
Ito flailed about. Foamy bubbles were pouring from his mouth. His bloodshot eyes had rolled up into his head, and they were so swollen they looked like they might burst out of their sockets. And Oh, wow. What happened? Suddenly, blood started to pour from both his eyes. It wasn't Yui's. It was very clearly his own. When I recoiled, he crawled out from under me and then curled up on the ground. He grabbed his head with his hands and started to spasm and flail about.
おい伊藤
伊藤君
Ito tore at his head and finally started to bang it against the ground.
やめろおい
Ah! That's a loud sound when he hits his head. Kurisu and I grabbed him and tried to stop him. His forehead had split open, and the blood coming out of it mixed with the blood coming out of his eyes. It was impossible to even tell what he looked like now. But he shook us off and started to jerk and flail some more.
離せんりやしろ俺は千里を見捨てたお前が許せないだって俺は千里のことを千里って誰だ南沢千里そうだ犯人だ宮代を狙った殺人犯気をつけろ宮代あの女はまた襲ってくるぞ千里はお前を恨んでるんだだってお前はあの子を見捨てたんだからなだから俺がこうして復讐してやったんだだからゆいちゃんが死んだのもお前のせいいや俺がゆいちゃんをこんなにしたのかよ俺がIto
Ito was shouting loudly, but he wasn't making any sense. It was as if what Kurisu had said was right, and someone was controlling his brain.
待てよ俺がゆいちゃんにこんなこと俺ゆいちゃんのこといつもいい子だなって思ってて宮代とも仲が良くてちょっと羨ましいなってでもそうか俺が殺したんだだって千里のためだもんなで千里って誰だっけ
Suddenly, Ito's laughter cut off, and he froze like a toy whose batteries had run out. Then all the strength drained from his body, and he collapsed. Kurisu and I got together. Oh, wait. Hold on. I can read. Kurisu and I, together, couldn't support the full weight of an unconscious human. So we all fell to the ground. Neither of us could move for a while. We just lay there, holding Ito between us. And staring at the bloody boxes that held our sister.
Yui.
Kurisu started to cry like a little girl. But there was nothing I could say to her. Because I felt like I was going to cry too, and it was all I could do to stop myself. I could hear many footsteps in the distance. It was either Shinjo and the police, or maybe the reporters around Aoba dorm. Yeah. Aw, man. I closed my eyes tight. I didn't want to see anything else. I didn't want to hear anything else.
ダメだよ、タクル兄。のの姉って本当はまだ子供なんだから、タクル兄が支えてあげなくっちゃ。ね。
Was it her ghost, maybe? I could see Yui smiling gently when I closed my eyes. Oh, we're on 9. What is there? 11 chapters, I think? Yeah, there should be 11 chapters. There was 11 in Chaos Head. I almost called it Chaos Child. 4 days after Yui's death. The autopsy, the police interviews, all of that came to an end, and Yui's body was sent for cremation. Her soul became thin, pure white smoke and soared up to the heavens. Kurisu and I stood between the trees at the funeral home and watched it rise.
今の火葬場ってさ、フィルターとか通してクリーンな煙しか出さないんだってな。
I'd say something that didn't matter and Kurisu would only half listen. We've been doing that for a while now. Dad was probably in the room where the family waited for the cremation to finish, holding Yuto in his strong arms the whole time. Uki, Senri, Arimura, and Kazuki were probably watching, but they couldn't do
不
anything.
思議ね。あんなに悲しくて涙が止まらなかったのに、今はもう平気なの。お葬式の費用のこととか、お墓をどうしようとか、そんなこと普通に考えてる。私ってきっと薄情なんだわ。
Even as she spoke, she looked thin and frail from her suffering, but there was a light like gray flame in her eyes. I never seen her look like that before.
いや、クルス以外にそういうのを仕切れる人がいないからだよ。父さんも気が抜けたみたいになっちゃってるし。
そうかな。
そうだよ。
Besides, I'd already heard the muffled sobbing that came from Kurisu's room late at night. After that, I moved back to Aoba dorm from the RV. Kurisu, Yuto, Uki, and Dad, all of them were shocked and saddened by Yui's death. If I were to leave them too, I couldn't bear the idea of a lonely Aoba dorm without me or Yui. And when I was alone, I found myself remembering Yui, and I'd feel like I was going to go crazy. So I wanted to be with someone I wanted to share my sorrows with. I was about to learn that this was what the family I tried to abandon was for, but for now, my head was full of thoughts of finding the person who'd done this to Yui.
タクル。葬儀が終わったら少し休むといいわ。あなたひどい顔してる。
Thanks.
それはお互い様だ。お前だってちゃんと休んでないだろ。
だって夜眠れないんだもの。恐ろしい夢ばかり見てしまって、何回も飛び起きて。ね。
Kurisu tightened her hands into a small fist.
一晩だけでいいから、今度タクルの部屋で寝ちゃダメかな。
Of course not. I wanted to refuse instantly, but she looked so tired and kept telling me that she couldn't sleep by herself. I had no choice but to silently nod. When nothing was left of Yui but tiny white fragments, we used chopsticks to move her to the urn. Only after she'd lost most of her weight and fit inside the tiny urn did she finally attain a normal death. That was one weight off my shoulders. I didn't want her staying in that horrible state forever. Yuto was shaking the whole time and moved his sister's bones into the urn. But his eyes were empty looking empty, looking at nothing. And he wasn't screaming or crying. While Yui's classmates and teachers sobbed, he did his work mechanically, with shaking hands. When it was done, he turned his empty eyes once more on what was left of his sister.
ユウト、僕が必ず本当の犯人を見つけ出してやるからな。約束する。
But he said nothing back. The funeral ended without an incident. Uki and Dad and Yuto came back home by taxi. Kurisu and I said our goodbyes to Sarika, Arimura, and Kazuki, then headed for home. We were walking slowly.
ユウト、大丈夫かな。
クルスや父さんもいるし、何より山添がずっとそばについてるから。
The loss of Yuto's sister had brought back his PTSD to the point where he was just as bad as he'd been after the earthquake. He'd mostly lost the ability to speak. He'd become extremely afraid of the dark, and sometimes he would get convulsions. He'd been given special permission to leave the house to attend Yui's funeral, but normally he wasn't even allowed to sleep in his room. Dad had decided to put him up in a room in Aoba Clinic.
不思議な巡り合わせだな。
It was Uki Yamazoe who was doing everything she could to take care of him. It seemed like the reason we'd saved her and brought her to Aoba dorm was so that she, Yui's old friend, could take care of him in his hour of need. When I told her that Kurisu looked sad, it's just a coincidence, was all she said.
あのね、タクル。そのウキちゃんのことだけど。よかったらでいいんだけどね。そろそろ名前で呼んであげてくれないかな。
I felt that pain in the back of my chest again. Around 6 months ago, I'd switched from calling her Nono to Kurisu. Looking back, the reason was so stupid that just thinking about it made me mad. But part of me was stubborn, and part of me felt just a little too embarrassed, so I'd missed the chance to switch back. I knew that sometimes I made Kurisu sad.
その、僕は別に構わないけど、山添はそれでいいのか？
実はウキちゃんがね、そう言ってたの。みんなに名前で呼んでもらって嬉しいって。なんだかうちの家族になれたみたいだって。でもウキちゃんには家族みたいじゃなくて、
本当の家族になってほしいなってそう思うからね。
Kurusu smiled, probably for the first time today.
わかった。山添じゃなくて、ウキな。了解。
ありがとう。彼女にも言っておくわ。タクルのこと名前で呼んでいいって。
ああ。あと、それだったらさ。
ん？
Then, should I... Can I start calling you Nono again? Just as I was about to ask,
宮代君、クルスさん。
some guy shows up.
はい。
We suddenly heard a voice and turned around. Shinju was standing there. He must have felt responsible for what happened because there was no sign of his usual validity. He mostly stared at the ground.
すまない。葬儀に出ようと思ってたんだが、間に合わなかったみたいだね。
そんな気を使わなくていいですよ。お仕事相変わらず忙しいんでしょ。
今日は病院での検査に思ったより時間がかかってしまって。
検査？
伊藤君のだよ。
The silence that had developed developed between Kurusu and I shattered in an
意
instant.
識が戻ったんですか？
合わせてください。お願いします。
But Shinjo shook his head.
いや、依然昏睡状態のままだ。
そうですか。
でも脳の検査結果は予想通りだったよ。
肥大化が？
ああ、大脳新皮質が異常に大きくなっている。久野里さんの見立てだと、これまでに見たどんな患者よりひどいそうだ。それだけ長期間にわたって、しかも強力な思考誘導を受けていたんだろうと久野里さんは言っている。
じゃあ伊藤は無実ということになりますよね。
I didn't want to think that my best friend had killed Yui of his own free will. I wanted to believe that he was someone's puppet, like Kurusu had said.
君たちの言うように、彼の後ろには誰かがいるはずだ。少なくとも俺はそう思う。
But there was a hesitation in his voice.
ただ、実行犯が伊藤君であることに変わりはない。君たちや俺や久野里さんなら、思考誘導がいかに強力なものか理解できるし、伊藤君には罪がないと言い切れるが、他の捜査員や検察、それに裁判所はそうはいかない。無論世間もだ。もちろんクルスさんの証言をもとに彼が洗脳のようなものを受けていたという線で捜査を進めているが、捜査員はみんな混乱してしまっている。とにかく不可解な点が多い上に、裏付けすら取りようのないことばかりだ。すべてが常識の範疇を超えている。かといってギガロマニアックスだの超能力だの、そんな話をするわけにもいかないだろう。
Shinjo bit the corner of his lip.
そのせいもあって、今の捜査方針に疑問を抱き始めている連中が増えてきた。伊藤君に不利な証拠もいろいろと出てきてしまっていてね。
どういうことですか、それ。
例えば、なくしたはずの君のスマホから伊藤君のスマホに脅迫まがいの無言電話があったろ。
はい。
Wait, was that Ito? But how?
単純なトリックだった。彼のスマホに偽の着信と電話番号を表示するアプリがインストールしてあって、 宮代くんの名前と電話番号が登録されていたよ。
Mm-hmm. So, that was it. Why didn't I realize that? I'd known there was a... I'd known... Hold on, I can read it. I'd known there was a freeware app that could do that. I remembered hearing how you were supposed to use it to end conversations with people you didn't want to talk to or get out of meetings.
あと、彼のパソコンから妙なチャットの履歴が見つかってね。
チャット？
君たち、エド・ルーカスって名前に聞き覚えはないか？
Wait, so that's what those texts on the phone were? That I couldn't read?
エド・ルーカス。
Wait, and then who's Amy? Both Kurisu and I looked confused. Neither of us had heard the name before.
それじゃあ、アミーちゃんは？
あ、それなら。
都市伝説の。
That was the character I'd snuck into AH Tokyo General Hospital to find when I was a kid.
いや、そのアミーちゃんじゃない。伊藤君のパソコンを調べたら、そういうハンドルネームの2人が頻繁にチャットを行っていたんだ。エド・ルーカスというのが伊藤君だ。チャットの内容は一連の殺人や宮代君を監視しているような内容ばかり。犯行動機として十分すぎるくらいのね。
そんな。
でも、そのチャット相手を操作すれば、真犯人の手がかりに。
But Shinjo balled his hands into fists.
もちろん、サイバー犯罪対策課に調べさせたよ。その結果、アミーちゃんは存在しなかった。
は？
どういうことですか？
The
アミ
person
ーち
he
ゃんの
was
正体も
texting.
伊藤君だったんだ。
Huh.
彼は一人でチャットもどきをしていた。
そんなバカな。
どうして？
これは久野里さんの説だが、伊藤君の心は長期にわたる思考誘導のせいですでに壊れていたんじゃないかと。
Wait, how long then? How long was he?
だが法廷で思考誘導という能力の存在が認められない以上、非常にまずい証拠になる。犯人しか知り得ない情報が含まれているんだ。
A new rage was building up within me. Whoever did that to Yui had also put Ito's mind under so much stress that it had shattered. I kicked a small rock at my feet. The rock collided with a nearby wall and split in two.
新庄さん、このままだと伊藤はどうなるんですか？その法律的に。
まだわからない。未成年とはいえ、事件が事件だけに。
でも真犯人が逮捕されれば別ですよね。そうすれば伊藤の罪だって軽く。
ダメだ。君は自分の身を守ることだけ考えろ。犯人なら俺が探す。
Ito must have realized what I was trying to say because he cut me off.
犯人を探すって一体どこをどう探すつもりなんですか？それに犯人が分かってもギガロマニアックス相手に新庄さんに何ができるんです？これまで結局何もできてないじゃないですか。そんなだからユイや伊藤は
It wasn't fair. I knew it wasn't fair, but I was so frustrated and angry that I couldn't stop myself.
タクル。新庄さんは一生懸命やってくれてる。責めるのは違うわ。
I looked at Shinjo's face, then looked away. He had the same pained look on his face that we'd had a moment ago.
すみません。つい。
いや、君の言う通りだ。俺は君たちにどう謝罪していいのか、未だにわからない。けれど、頼むから、命を危険にさらすような真似はしないでくれ。特に宮代君、11月4日に何かしようと考えているのなら。
11月4日？
ニュージェネレーションの狂気。最後の事件の日ですよね。となれば、その日に真犯人は必ず動く。
Shinjo's expression became even more pained.
だから、宮代君。ダメか。
He must have seen how strong my resolve was because he turned towards Kurusu.
クルスさん。
はい。
どうやら俺から頼んでも無駄らしい。宮代君がおかしなことをしないよう見張っててくれないか。俺はこれ以上犠牲者を出したくない。
Kurusu quietly nodded.
わかりました。11月4日が過ぎるまで、タクルには危険なことをさせないよう注意しておきます。
クルス。
Something seemed strange about what she'd said, so I turned to look. But she had already bowed to Shinjo and started walking toward Aoba dorm. Oh. I'm sorry, the words are too small. No, I'll try. Latest victim chopped up into tiny little boxes. Too much, even for me. So we've settled on fictional young girl that's from the law Tokyo past, banning depictions of sex between fictional youths in anime and manga, right? But that was like, what, 5 or 6 years ago? Does anybody even remember it? It's better than well done for a chick who got burned to death. Hey, how about... Okay, well, I'm not reading this anymore. I had to stop myself from smashing the newspaper's club computer monitor. I came very close to depraving Kazuki of her means of playing Iso 2. Sarika, Kazuki, and Arimura were watching me in shock from a corner of the room. You died like that. So, what the fuck are you doing playing around like this? Like this is some kind of game.
タク、大丈夫？
Sarika's worried voice brought me back to reality. My hands were red from where I'd slammed them on the desk, and they stung. They might swell up soon.
みんなごめん。
I glanced one last time at the @channel comments, then closed the browser.
だから今朝警告したんですよ。チャンネルはしばらく見ない方がいいって。
ト上に何か情報がないか探してて、つい。
I should have never looked at the nest of self-proclaimed right-siders. They were nothing but idiots being cleverly manipulated by paid professionals.
いや、それは以前の僕も同じだったのか。
I'd been one of them too, at least up until Revolving Dead. But as I started to become a part of the murders, I began to realize how irresponsible and insensitive the information decimated on the internet was, and how awful real life could be. It was karma. I'd been proud of my status as a right-sider, and now the whole thing felt like a punishment.
もう見ちゃったんなら言っときますけどね。伊藤先輩の個人情報も出ちゃってますよ。連続殺人犯かどうかって話になってます。
ほんの少し前は南沢千里のことで騒いでたくせに。
I stood and picked up the map we'd pulled off the wall. I put it back on the board. Whoa.
タク？どうするんです？
もう一度これまでの情報をチェックして見落としていることがないか調べてやる。そこに真犯人につながるヒントがあるかもしれない。
Hold on, I'm gonna stretch. And I think I'm gonna play memory games. Memory games. Whoever did that to Yui, I wasn't letting them get away. Here, hold on. I'm standing sideways. I can fix it. I can fix it. Yeah. What? I almost dropped my controller. Hold on. I'd find them and then I'd...
それならクルス先輩も呼んできましょうか。
いや、あいつは生徒会の仕事に専念するって言ってた。何でもいいから忙しく働いていたいって。そうしてないとユイのことを思い出してしまうからって。
そうですか。
For some reason, Arimura looked suspicious for a second. It would take a while for me to figure out what her expression meant. At the time, I didn't really think anything of it.
最初の事件、こっちみんなと2番目の事件、オトモレタンについては僕は直接関わっていない。だから保留にしておくとして、3番目の事件、回転デッド、ここからが本題だ。
私と初めて会ったのもこの時でしたね。
ああ。で、あの事件で何か見落としがなかったかずっと考えてたんだけど、それほど重要じゃないと思って放っておいたことがあったんだ。覚えてないか、尾上。
何？
Locked door suddenly opened? Yeah, locked door suddenly opened. No, we already know it's my power that opened the locked door, right? That's not an issue at all anymore. Think again. Aw, man. Police stop us with uniforms in Love Hotel? Should be hidden camera in Love Hotel room that shows killer. Is this one? I don't remember, it was so long ago.
僕と尾上はラブホの中をこの制服で歩いてたんだ。普通なら補導されるだろう。
Oh, okay, that's what it meant, the sentence.
確かにそうですね。
尾上がとっさにカップルのふりをしたからごまかしたと思ったけど、よく考えればやっぱり変だ。 壁砲の制服は目立つ。警官が気づかないはずないんだ。なのに僕らはそのままスルーされた。あの時違和感を覚えたんだよ。
タクは考えすぎだと思うけど。
いや、今思えばあの警官、犯人に思考誘導されてたんじゃないだろうか。
思考誘導？何のためにです？
僕らを有村たちのいる殺人現場へ導くためとか。
だからなぜそんな必要が？
それはまだわからない。後でもう一度考えてみる。
If the goal was to show me a brutal murder scene and lead me to Arimura, then why?
その次の事件では、この学園でネット記者の渡部が殺された。この事件にも見逃しているポイントがある。あの時はそれほど不思議だと思ってなかったけど、よく考えるとなんかおかしい。
おかしいって何が？
あの時すでに渡部は有名なネット記者だった。それに比べて、まあ、こんなことは言いたくないけど、うちは有名でも何でもない、ただの高校の新聞部だろ。なのに渡部の方から僕らとのディスカッションを申し込んできたんだ。
それって宮代先輩たちの方が力士シールについての情報が早くて、でネットでパクリだって騒がれた渡部さんが慌ててごまかしに来たんじゃないんですか？そうだったよね。
ほらな、やっぱり変だ。
なんで？
有村や尾上はそれほどヘビーなネットユーザーじゃないよな。
ええ、まあ普通かな。
そんな二人でさ今みたいに思ったんだろう。渡部が自分のパクリをごまかしに来たって。つまり僕らと対談なんかしても渡部の意図は見え見えで余計に炎上するだけだと思うんだ。メリットなんかどこにもないだろう。
ああ、確かに。
その程度のことネット記者としてやってきた渡部に計算できないはずがない。
Someone as clever as him was capable of coming up with fresher information fast and changing the subject. The internet was always hungry for new things to talk about. Give them a big scoop and they would forget all about it.
じゃあどういうことなの？タク。
Oh, hi! Hello! Hello there. What's up, Clairval? How are you doing today? I hope you're doing well. Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you doing? How's it going? And you're here! Yay! You did it! Yippee!
これは僕の考えなんだけど。
There's so many words. Okay, we're talking about the... Watabe wanted to buy us off to make him look good. Watabe was going to apologize for what he'd done at the interview. Watabe was mind-controlled before the festival and could not make good decisions. Maybe that last one. Ooh. Let's see if we got it right.
そう、渡部自身すら気づいてなかったかもしれないけど、僕らに対談を申し込むよう思考を誘導されてたんじゃないかと思う。そして、
right.
みんなの注目を集めたところで殺された。
でも宮代先輩、ラブホの件もそうですけど、やっぱり動機がわかりません。犯人は何がしたかったんです？
動機か。
The motive. Arimura was right. What was the point of making Watabe do that? What was their hidden
わか
goal?
った。この事件についてももう少し考えてみる。
I put a note on. Hold on, I can do it. I put a note about on. No, yeah. I'm doing awesome. Yesterday I finished the first part of my group essay, so now I'm relaxing. But now I'm wondering what creative hobbies I want to do for today. Ooh, nice. Yeah, you finished a bunch of stuff? That's pretty cool. You thinking about hobbies? What hobbies are you thinking about? I put a note on... wait. Now I can read this sentence. I can do it. I can do it. I put a note about on Watabe up on the board.
ちなみに渡部の体内から出てきたシールはみんな偽物の力士シールだったことが分かってる。
どうして本物を使わなかったのかな。
それは多分犯人も能力者だからだろう。
The sumo sticker, the sumo stickers, aka the 11th Rosash, had a terrible effect on the minds of psychics. Using real sumo stickers to kill Watabe would pose a serious risk to them as well.
犯行現場で犯人自身が誤って精神汚染を受けたりすれば、僕や有村と同じように身動きが取れなくなってしまう。そうなったら逃げることができなくなるからな。
確かにあのシールを見るとタクひどいことになるもんね。
Arimura nodded several times, frowning.
本当に嫌ですよね。あれなんていうのか、悪夢みたいな妄想がどんどん心の中に広がってきて、そのうちそれが妄想なのか現実なのか分かんなくなって。
そうだな。あの夜のことを覚えてるか、有村。
あの夜？
僕と有村がパイロキネシスとハイダリコに襲われた時のことだ。あの夜は尾上もいたよな。確かお前が僕のトレーラーハウスに来て。
I'm glad to hear you doing well, Claire. Well, yay, thank you, yeah. Thanks.
のんちゃんの話を聞いてあげてってお願いした時だよね。でも私タクにそれだけ伝えて家に帰っちゃったからな。その後のことは。
そうか。でも家への帰り道何かに気づかなかったか？
何かって？
On the way home, there were suddenly more sumo stickers around. I think that's it. The park was sealed off. The pyrokinetic ambushed me at the park entrance. I think it was there suddenly, because that happened at some other point. Something else.
確かになんかあっちこっちベタベタ貼ってあったね。
ああ、僕はクルスに会おうと思ってアーバ寮へ向かったんだ。ところが公園や街中の歴史シールの数がいきなり増えてた。しかも本物のシール、11番目のロールシャッハが。
All
そのせいで
stickers were real.
僕は精神を完全に侵食されそうになった。
Arimura seemed to remember what happened. She gave a little scream and hugged herself tight.
あの時期は いろんなテレビ番組やネットで力士シールが話題になってたんですよ。そのせいでどんな恐ろしいものか知らないバカな連中が面白がって張りまくってたんです。迷惑な話です。
Yeah, what the heck?
いや、よく考えてみるとネットやテレビのせいじゃないような気がするんだ。
どういうこと？
I faced the rest of my group and chose my words carefully as I tried to figure this out for
あ
myself.
の夜もそうだけど、僕はネットニュースやテレビが力士シールを話題にするたびにずっとチェックをしてきた。でもニュースで扱っているのはどれも偽のシールばかりだったんだ。本物の力士シール、11番目のロールシャッハ画像はほとんど出たことがない。つまりテレビやネットのシールを真似て喜んでいるような連中は実は本物がどんなデザインなのか知らないんだよ。そんな連中の作ったシールなんていくら大量に貼ってあっても怖くもなんともないだろう。
じゃあどうしてあの夜は？
おそらく真犯人がやったんだ。自分も精神汚染されるかもしれないのに、そのリスクを冒してまで本物のシールを貼って回った。その目的はおそらく
Probably. Oh, there's nothing up here. Oh wait, I gotta push the button. That's why nothing showed up. Oh my goodness. To cause psychological pain and awaken us as gigalomaniacs. To kill us as a part of the return of new... Is that an A or an F? New... something madness. Oh, generation! It's a G! Oh my goodness. New generation madness. To lead us to the parakinetic. I think this one. 'Cause that's what the stickers do. Oh man. No, we'd already awoken to our powers. Arimura in particular could already use her D-sword. Using the sewer stickers to scare her wouldn't accomplish anything. Think again. Aww. But I already thought so hard I can't do it again. Lead us to the parakinetic. Then.
あの夜、僕らはひたすらシールから逃げ回って。
行き着いた先にあのハイダリコって人が現れた。なるほど、そうですね。
つまり犯人はシールを使ってハイダリコが待ち受けている場所へ僕らを誘導したんだ。そしてハイダリコは僕らを襲ってきた。
でも考えてみるとあの人も伊藤先輩と同じだったんですね。思考を操られて犯人役をやらされただけ。かわいそうだね。
ああ、僕らは真犯人に完全にはめられて彼女を南沢千里だと思い込んでしまった。
The killer even went through the trouble of preparing fake evidence.
証拠か。僕たちがハイダリコを南沢千里だと完全に信じ込んでしまったのは
It was the ID card. Yes.
南沢千里の ID カード、あれには完全に騙された。
でもなんで彼女があのカードを持ってたんでしょうね。
その理由が全くわからない。完全に謎のままだ。
思うんですけど、やっぱり本物の南沢千里が生きててハイダリコに罪をかぶせようとしたんじゃ。
でもクルスはそんなことありえないってずっと言ってる。
クルス先輩は南沢千里をかばってるだけだと思います。 下手をすれば共犯かもしれませんよ。
お前、言っていいことと悪いことがあるぞ。
I almost screamed at Arimura. Was she trying to tell me that Kurisu worked with the killer to do what? To do that to Yui? But Kazuki grabbed my shirt and stopped me. She shook her head as if telling me to calm down.
タク、怒鳴らないで。怖いよ。
悪い。有村もすまなかった。
いえ、こっちこそ軽はずみでした。でも宮代先輩、疑うのであれば全てを疑ってみるべきです。以前クルス先輩が私の前で嘘をついたの覚えてますよね。
She was right. Kurisu had insisted that Senri Minamisawa was dead, but she hadn't actually seen her
も
die.
ちろん私やセリ、花も例外じゃないですよ。
Hmm?
そんなこと言い出したら誰も信用できないじゃないか。
伊藤先輩の事件を考えればそのくらい用心した方がいいという話です。私結構好きだったんですよ、伊藤先輩。もちろんラブとかじゃないですけど、あんなに言葉がまっすぐで裏表がなくて、たとえ嘘をついてもバレバレで、その嘘だって誰かを傷つけるような悪い嘘じゃなかったし、すごくいい人だなって感じてました。だから今初めて思ってます。自分の能力をもっとちゃんと使えばよかったって。
有村。
ひなちゃん。これまで私ずっと後悔してたんです。こんな能力が欲しいなんて思ってしまったこと。結局人の言葉の裏表なんて知らない方が幸せだったから。でも今はもっと後悔してます。私が能力をちゃんと活かしていれば、多分伊藤先輩の言葉がどこかおかしいことに気づくことができたはずです。そうしたらゆいさんだってあんなことには。
Ryomura's eyes looked so sad.
いや、違う。有村のせいじゃない。
It's my fault. I sighed a little and moved away from the map.
そろそろ昼休みも終わりだ。このくらいにしとこう。あと、しばらく新聞部の活動は休止にする。涌井先生にそう言われてるし、放課後も集まらなくていいから。
そっか。仕方ないですね。
あ、でも和樹は別に演奏とかプレイしに来ても構わないからな。部室の鍵はいつでも開けとく。
I forced myself to smile, but Kazuki softly lowered her eyes, as if to say no. The sun set early in the late autumn. Just like I said before lunch, there was no club meeting today. I had a short conversation with Serika and then headed straight for Aoba dorm. Even so, it was already starting to get dark and it was easy to imagine some hidden attacker lurking in the shadows. What's happening so far in the game? So I guess what happened in this one, there was another killing, and it was Yui, which was our sister, and then and the person who did it was Ito, but he might have been mind controlled for like probably the entire time, like of like the entire time of the game. And then what else? So we thought Senri Minamisao was alive, but she's probably not, but she probably isn't. And then I guess now we're waiting for November 4th, which is when the last killing should happen. Oh yeah, and Ito is also... I don't know. Oh yeah, but he's also probably working with the killer, but I also... a lot of doors have been opened with no answers yet. Did that help? Did that help with like answering the question at all? But there was more than just fear inside me now. Of course, I was afraid of the murderer. I was afraid of being killed in some horrible way, of dying in incredible pain. But I could also feel the black rage rearing its ugly head inside me. You're going to pay for what you did to Yui. Whoever the fuck you are, I will find you, and I will you? Are the words coming off the screen? Why? And I will you into tiny, bloody little shreds. Those feelings grew inside me with each passing moment.
ああ、君、宮代拓郎くんだね。悪いけど、ちょっと話を聞かせてくれないかな。
No.
君が第一発見者なんだよね。最初に見たとき、どんな気持ちだった？
The media was still camped out around Aoba dorm. Actually, because of what happened with Yui, there were more of them than ever. And now that we were victims in their minds, that made them more self-appointed heroic defenders. They'd gotten even bolder.
犯人は君の親友だって噂だけど本当なの？すごいショックだよね。どうやって謝罪してほしい？
友達はなんでこんなことをしたと思う？何か悩んでいたとか心当たりはないかな？
うるさい。お前ら全員ユイと同じにしてやろうか。
Oh. Several of the lights the reporters were holding shattered at the same time. Oh, our sword! Will we pick it up this time? Then I suddenly came to my senses. Shocked at the strong impulse I'd felt, and the eerie light the D-sword was giving off.
今日はまだ11月2日。問題の日は明後日だ。それまでは大丈夫。何も起こらない。何も。
Wow. I pushed my way past the media and ran inside the dorm, repeating the words as if they were a magic spell.
ただいま。
I tried to calm myself down and act like nothing had happened. If Yuto heard yelling, it would wake him up.
おかえりなさい。タクルさん。
I could see tiny little Uki from the kitchen. We still weren't used to calling each other by our first names.
晩ご飯もうすぐできますから。
ありがとう。
None of us, including Dad, really wanted to eat anything, but she made dinner every night anyway. That was her own way of struggling against the sadness, though.
父さんとクルスは？
先生は警察です。ゆいさんのことで。
そっか。
ののさんは診察室でゆうとくんの看病を。
うん。なあ、ウキ。
はい。
今日はまだいいけど、あさって11月4日はそうやって一人になっちゃ絶対にダメだ。みんなと一緒にいること。あと、誰に誘われても絶対に外へ出ないこと。いいな。
Yeah.
それはタクルさんでもですか？
ああ、そうだ。誰も信用しちゃダメだ。
I remembered what Arimura had said, and my heart ached a little. Uki mumbled to herself for a moment, seemingly considering my words. Then she nodded.
ちょっとユウトの様子を見てくる。
じゃあ、ののさんにもご飯だって伝えてください。ゆうとくんのお世話は私が交代しますから。
わかった。
I left the dining room and quietly went down the stairs to the clinic. When I opened the door, Yuta was lying on the bed and looking up from the ceiling. He was showing more emotion than he had been right after it happened, and he would answer when you spoke to him now. But he was being given strong psychotropics and spent most of his time asleep or barely
ユウ
alert.
ト、
ああ、おかえりなさい。
どうだ、具合は。
うん、よくなったよ。もう平気。
He forced himself to smile, probably because he didn't want to worry me. But the muscles that controlled his face weren't working the way he wanted yet, and it looked more like he was about to cry.
クルスは？
I looked around and didn't see her near the bed.
あっち。今眠ってるから、そっとしておいてあげて。
I found her at the desk where Dad had kept his work computer. She was face down on the desk with her long hair covering the top half of her body. Her breathing was gentle and rhythmic. The computer was still on, and she must have fallen asleep while working on it.
のの姉ちゃん、あんまり寝てないみたいなんだ。僕の世話だけじゃなくて、生徒会のお仕事とかいっぱいあるみたいで、ずっとパソコンに向かってるし。僕ならもう大丈夫って言ってるのに。
大丈夫かどうか診断するのは父さんだろ。
そうだけど。
お前はあんまり難しいこと考えるなよ。早く元気になれって。
Neither of us would bring up Yui. We'd probably have to wait until Yuto was a lot more grown up. I tapped him on the shoulder, then grabbed the blanket off the other bed and softly walked over to Kurisu. Even with the heater on, I figured she might catch a cold if she slept in a place like this. But I felt silent when I saw what was on the computer screen. It was displaying several sites with sites that detail with the return of new generation madness. And at the very front was the video from Don't Look at Me. It was paused at the moment where the victim realized he'd sliced his own arm and passed out in a puddle of blood, tears, and drool. There was a newly bought notebook next to her filled with words in her pretty handwriting. Some of it was names, locations, and times that overlapped with what we had on the map. On the club room wall, but Kurisu had made several sharp insights of her own. For example, Incident 2. Why didn't the victim put on makeup for her last street performance? The mind controller is male. He didn't consider that a girl would need to put on makeup. Senri's ID card. No one but me knew that. I blurred it under the memorial in remembrance of her. The killer had to read my mind to dig it up. The killer can read minds, which means there are two killers. One who can read minds and one who can control minds. Supports Takeru's multiple killer theory. There was page after page of it. Why not? She must have sensed that I was staring at her because she had moved a little. Her almond eyes slowly opened and she blinked several times. And then she raised her head and looked at me.
なんだ、タクルか。おかえりなさい。
ただいま。ほら、毛布。風邪ひくぞ。
やだ、私居眠りしちゃってたのね。ありが。
And then she seemed to realize her mistake. She quickly reached her hand to turn off the computer monitor. I grabbed it.
ね、タクル、これは。
I refused to let go of her hand.
一体何なの、タクル。
それはこっちのセリフだ。さっきのあれが生徒会の仕事だっていうのか。
Kurisu flinched a little. This was the exact opposite of how things usually went between us. It was always me who did the flinching.
そうだけど。
そんなわけあるかよ。
痛いから、いい加減手離して。
But I kept holding on and glaring at her a little. At first she squirmed a little, but eventually her naturally strong will won out, and she glared right back at me. I don't know how long we stayed like that, but surprisingly, it was Kurisu who gave up first. She silently put her other hand on top of mine.
ごめんなさい。だから話して。
I relaxed my grip a little and shook her hand away.
なんで一人であんなことしてんだよ。まさか自分一人だけで真犯人を探そうなんて思ってないよな。誰も巻き込まないようにとか。
それは。
僕が同じようなことをしたら怒るくせに自分はいいのかよ。自分はいいのかよ。 もしも犯人に目をつけられてユイみたいにされたらどうするんだ。そんなの冗談じゃない。
タクル。
Kurisu fell silent for a second after I spat out the words. And then she started, yeah, I did. And then she started to talk, hesitantly, as if she were uncertain of how to say what she was thinking.
前にタクルが言ってたでしょ。事件が自分のことを追いかけてきてるみたいだって。
ああ。
私もそうなの。この事件に千里が関わってるって知った時から、私はいつも彼女に追われてる。
Senri Minamisawa? What did she mean? She was following her? Didn't she say she died in the Shibuya earthquake? Then that was a lie, and Senri was not only me, but Kurisu? She must have sensed my confusion because Kurisu shook her head.
千里は地震で死んだわ。それは間違いない。私を追いかけてくるのは、なんて言ったらいいのかな。彼女の亡霊なの。
Ah, you're being haunted. My mouth hung open as I struggled to understand what she just said. I never imagined she'd use an unscientific word like ghost.
なんだよそれ。意味がわからない。
ごめんなさい。今はまだこれしか言えないの。話す勇気が出ないから。
Her face twisted in sorrow.
そうか。クルスにはまだたくさん僕に言えないことがあるんだな。
By the time I realized what I'd said, it was too late. The pain in my heart had come back, and the words had slipped out of my mouth. Even after I'd sworn I was never going to say those words to her again. Just like I expected, she looked even sadder.
クルス、違うんだ。今のは本心じゃない。
けど。
前にも言っただろ。今の僕はもう昔とは違うって。それに僕はちゃんと今ここにいるじゃないか。まだ怒ってたり嫌ってたりしたら戻ってくるはずがない。
Kurisu sat down on the bed, exhausted. I suddenly realized that Yuto had left. It was dinner time after all, and he'd probably thought the two of us wanted to be alone. There was a long silence after that. Neither Kurisu nor I said a word. We just stared at different spots in the room. And eventually, Kurisu started to talk.
いつかタクルにだけは私が言えないでいること、何もかも全部話したいと思ってる。そのせいでまた嫌われちゃうかもしれないけど、それでも構わない。その時はちゃんと最後まで聞いてくれる？
あ
りがとう。
And finally she smiled. It was a weak smile, which looked as though it could fade at any second.
ねえ、タクル。覚えてる？地震の後、昏睡から目を覚ました日のこと。
あの時は頭がぼーっとしててあんまり。でも最初に見たのがクルスの泣き顔だったことだけははっきり覚えてるよ。
そう。
今考えると不思議だな。お前なんで泣いてたんだ？
嬉しかったからよ、目を覚ましてくれて。
どうして？あの時の僕とクルスは、まだ赤の他人だったろ。
タクルはそうだったかもしれないけど、私はタクルのことを1年以上ずっと面倒見てきたのよ。私にとっては大切な家族の一員になってたもの。
The fragile smile was still on her face.
だからお姉ちゃんはタクルのことなら何でも知ってるのよ。恥ずかしくて他の女の子には言えないようなことまで全部ね。
やめろよ。そういうこと言うのはなしって約束だろ。
そうだったわね。ごめん。もう言わない。
And then there was another silence. It was as if the two of us were trapped by memories of the past and had forgotten that time even existed. And then time started to move again.
そっか、晩ご飯ほったらかしだった。悪い。
いえ、すぐに温め直しますから。ごめんね、ウキちゃん。
How long? How long were we down there? Uki may or may not have been able to tell what was going on between us, but she left for the upstairs dorm without another word.
タクル、先に行ってて。
わかった。あ、クルス。
As she got up, as she got up for the bed and headed for the dorm, I called out to her.
何？
Her soft chestnut hair flew upwards as she spun around.
僕はさ。
Spit it out. As I looked into her beautifully colored eyes, I was finally able to say it.
もう家族の誰も失いたくないんだ。
How long had it been since I called Kurisu part of my family? Her eyes went wide for a moment, and then suddenly she started to cry.
だから本当に頼む。やめてくれ。一人で犯人探しなんて危険なこと。もしもお前まであんなことに言うみたいなことになったら。あれ、情けないな。泣くなよ。僕は情けない。
わかった。もうしない。だからお願い。タクルも約束して。私を残して行ってしまわないって。私を置いて消えてしまわないって。私耐えられない。こんなに悲しいの耐えきれない。
She probably didn't even know what she was doing, but she ran up to me and buried her face in my chest. She wrapped her arms around me as if she refused to let go. And cried for a long, long time, calling out Yui's name in a tiny voice. Until now, I'd always been bothered by the idea of a family. I thought it was just a heavy, annoying chain that kept me stuck in one place. Dad, Yui, Yuto, Kurisu, and even Uki now. They were all part of my family. It was only then that I realized that it really hit me that Yui was gone forever. And I held Kurisu's frail body tight and cried like a baby for a long, long time. November 3rd, my birthday! Yippee! The school was empty since it had closed for Cultural Day. Of course, no one from the newspaper club was there, and the room was empty and quiet. I'd been there alone since lunchtime. I wasn't sure how many hours I'd been staring at the map, looking for a clue that pointed toward the real killer. I had until tonight. Once it was past midnight, November 4th would be here. And then the final return of the New Generation Madness murder could occur at any time. The killer was probably getting ready right now. Who was their last target? Was it me, Arimura, Uki, or someone I didn't know at all? Arimura had already said she would spend the night at Aoba dorm. I'd asked her to stay with Uki and the others at all times. With her power, she should be able to avoid a repeat of what happened to Yui. And I...
ごめんな、クルス。僕は嘘つきだ。
I would find the real killer and make sure they came after me. And then I'd take revenge for Yui. Yesterday I had spoken with Arimura and the others and gone over the things that didn't make sense. When we talked, there were a few things we'd left to come back to later.
まず、3番目の事件、回転デッド。
Why did the policeman ignore us when he was inside the Love Hotel, wearing Hekio Academy uniforms? The answer was probably that I'd initially thought that the officer was being mind-controlled. The only reason I could think of was that the killer wanted me to be at the scene. But I couldn't figure out why.
なら、逆に考えてみたらどうだ?
What if I hadn't gone there? Why would that cause a problem for them? I might not have noticed the connection between the stickers and the case. I might not have noticed that my power was telekinesis. I might not have seen a person die in front of me for real. Yeah, that one. No, it's the... I'm pretty sure it's the telekinesis, right? It's true, that's where I met Arimura and Kunasato, which is how I learned I was a giglomaniac. But it wasn't through this case I learned I could use telekinesis. Oh, I should rethink this. Then the stickers? I assume? I mean, no, I know, because I've been paying attention. That's right. I'd taken a video without even thinking about it, and after analyzing it 100 times, I found the sumo sticker. And then I'd found the other stickers at the other murder sites. Then I made a video connecting the murders of the sumo stickers and uploaded it to the internet. And because of that, our minor little newspaper club site had gotten an incredible number of hits.
いや、待て。じゃあ犯人は新聞部のために僕をあの現場へ誘導したっていうのか。そんなバカなことあるわけないだろ。
I frowned and crumpled up the paper where I'd written newspaper club site hits and threw it into the trash. And then I glared at the map again. I looked at the note that we'd marked to come back to.
4番目の事件、ゴッツァンデスの渡部についてか。
the real reason our site had gotten so many hits was that Watabe was famous. Was the famous internet journalist had gotten involved. That's why he decided to hold an interview with us, but just like I'd said yesterday, I couldn't figure out why. The interview would have done nothing but fuel the flame war. So, I'd guessed that Watabe had already been under the control of the killer.
待てよ。ということは、渡部とは逆に犯人にとっては僕らのディスカッションにメリットがあったということにならないか。
Who stood to gain by having Watabe come visit Hekio? I guess the newspaper club, right? Out of all these?
そうだ。最大のメリットがあるのは僕ら新聞部じゃないか。
I glanced at the paper I'd just thrown in the trash that read, Newspaper Club site hits! We were already kind of famous because of the video we'd uploaded about the sumo stickers. The arrival of Watabe, the famous reporter, only increased that. And then, just as the decision was about to start, Watabe had become a victim of the return of the new generation madness. Talk about sensational.
まるで僕らの新聞部を有名にしようとしてるみたいだ。どうして犯人はそんなことを。
And after that, the newspaper club got deeper and deeper into the case. And then the case became more than just something what we reported on. We went through things that no high school newspaper club would ever experience, and felt excitement, terror, and surprise.
新聞部は完全にもてあそばれてる。
Part of that was the attack on me and Arimura by the pyrokinetic. Even then, the killer had shown signs of toying with us.
その時、僕らを襲ったパイロキネシスの正体は南沢千里じゃなくハイダリコという他人だった。
But the killer had Senri Minamisawa's ID card. That was what fooled us, and had also almost sent the case off in the wrong
で
direction.
も、あの ID カードの謎だけは、ゆうべようやく解けた。
Because I'd seen this about Senri Minamisawa's ID card in Kurisu's note. Kurisu put card under memorial. I think it was put it under the memorial. That's right. This is what it said in Kurisu's note. Senri's ID card, no one but me knew that. I buried it under the memorial in remembrance of her. The killer had to read my mind to dig it up. The killers can read my mind. It was safe to assume that she was right, and the killer had read her mind and taken the ID card from the memorial. But what was the
真
reason?
犯人はどうして南沢千里が僕を襲ってきてるように見せたかったんだ。一体何を狙って。
Try to expose human experiments by making Senri Minamisawa famous, tried to terrify me by bringing up my past trauma, tried to drive Ito, who loves Senri, into committing crimes. Maybe this middle one? That's right. It felt like the killer was using Senri Minamisawa to take advantage of my trauma. In fact, I felt terrified many times because of that.
いや、ちょっと待ってくれ。ってことは、
I spoke aloud without even realizing.
真犯人の狙いは新聞部じゃなくこの僕だっていうのか。そんなバカな。
There was no way they could have committed all those murders just to mess with me. It made no sense, and it was far too elaborate. And for all the effort they put into it, there was something that didn't make sense about the incident with Ito and Yui. That was... revenge for a girl you once loved. Too pathetic to be a motive. From the order, Uki and Yui should have been the next target. It makes no sense to turn Ito into killer if motive is vengeance. He didn't know her. This one?
そうなんだ。あの事件、伊藤を犯人に仕立て上げる意味が全くない。いや、それどころか、伊藤を犯人にするのは明らかに間違ってる。
If the point was making it look like this was Senri Minamisawa's revenge, there were other people who would make more sense. For example, though it was scary even to think about it, Senri Minamisawa's best friend, Kurisu Kawahara, if one of them had committed the murder, the police never would have become suspicious at all. It's possible that we might not have even figured out that mind control was involved. This whole thing could have ended with the assumption that it was a plot to get revenge for an old friend.
犯人はどうして無関係な伊藤を選んだ？
And why did they make... Oh, I dropped something. I'm gonna pick it up now. And why did they make him tell lies that would be easily found out? What was the point?
なんだか伊藤はあくまでも操り人形で最初から真犯人が別にいると告白してるみたいじゃん。
And then I suddenly stood up from my chair.
それが狙いなのか?
What are they after? The killer deliberately chose Ito, who had no motive at all to commit the crime. Of course we realized that immediately and started looking even harder for the real killer. None of the cops expected for Shinjo would believe in psychic powers and add in the media's speculation and the public's confusion, and the interest would only grow. What exactly had happened? More and more pundits and communicators were arguing over whether Ito, whom they always called Boy A, was really the killer. And of course, multiple threads showed up on 8chan simultaneously declaring both his innocence and his guilt. There were even threads speculating about who the true killer might be, and they even showed no sign of stopping. And tomorrow was the 4th. From midnight tonight to midnight tomorrow, the whole city would be waiting with bated breath to see the killer's next move.
これが全て犯人の思い通りだとしたら
It was like they were challenging me to a game. They lured me in with the return of the new generation madness, which they knew I'd take an interest in. They used Senri Minamisawa to drive me into a corner from which I couldn't escape. They were moving everyone around for their own ends, both wrong-siders and self-proclaimed right-siders, like chess pieces on a board. And they wanted me, the other player, to try and stop the last murder on November 4th. I put my hand on my forehead and stared at the map, unable to believe it.
それだけのために
They killed all those people for that? That's why they did that to Yui?
違う妄想だこんなの全部僕の妄想に決まってる
I could hear that I was whispering to myself.
そうさこの犯行の裏にはもっとすごい陰謀があるに違いないんだ社会全体を揺るがすような壮大で緻密な陰謀が
And we've been caught up in the huge plan, and that's why this was happening to us. That had to be it. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a ringing phone. Was it my phone or somebody else's phone? I quickly looked around for the source. It was my smartphone, which I kept inside my bag. I quickly pulled it out and looked at the screen.
新庄さん
Shinjo had been visiting Ito in the hospital every day since he was in charge of Yui's case. If he was calling, that meant... I forced myself to stay calm as I hit the answer button.
宮代君か
はい伊藤目を覚ましたんですか
ああ2時間ほど前だ
2時間ってなんでもっと早く知らせてくれないんです
無茶を言わないでくれ他の捜査員が病室を出ていくタイミングを待ってたんだこうして君に電話してること自体処分物なんだからな
で伊藤は無事なんですね
ああ意識レベルは改善されてきた話もできるただどうだ久野里さん
I could hear Kunisata's voice on the other end of the phone.
大脳新皮質だけでなく海馬や言語中枢にもダメージを負っている無理をさせたらその後のことは知らないぞ
という状態だそれでも伊藤君がどうしても君と話したいと言ってる
はい
いいか変わるぞ
はい
I gulped down the saliva in my mouth. Suddenly, I felt a terrible uncertainty in my heart. What was I supposed to say to Ito? Even if he'd been mind-controlled, he was still the one who chopped up my little sister. But I didn't hear any sound coming from the phone.
伊藤
Oh, and here comes my cat. I see her looking at the desk like she's gonna jump on it. But she also might not. I don't know. I don't know what she's planning in her little kitty cat head. Or she might climb on me. One of those. Oh, hey, Ari! Howdy, Clara. Just here to say hi since it's 3 a.m. for me. But I hope you have a great stream. Yay, thank you! Yeah! 3 in the a.m. in the a.m. Yeah, thank you for stopping by. Oh, did you hear my cat? She also she also said that. I heard the sound of a deep breath on the other side of the phone.
伊藤大丈夫か
In the end, that was all I could say.
あ僕だ
許してくれ頼む
何
俺はゆいちゃんのこと殺す
いいそれ以上言わなくていい
I tried to cut him off, but he ignored me and started crying.
ちゃんはお前の大事な妹じゃないか。なのに俺がこの手でダメだ。俺が死んだくらいじゃこの罪は償えない。償えないだろ宮次郎。
なんだよそれ、死ぬとか言うな。
しっかりしろ伊藤君。
Shinjo's yells overlapped with my
いい
words.
か、僕はお前がユイにあんなことをしたとは思ってない。本当の犯人は別にいる。
本当の犯人。
ああ、お前は無実なんだよ。何でもいい、思い出してくれ。お前誰かに何かされたんだよな。なあ。
誰かに何か。
そうだ、お前に思考誘導をかけたやつは誰なんだ。
Suddenly, I heard him scream in pain on the other end of the phone.
伊藤、
どうした？おい！
ストップだ。やめさせろ。脳波がおかしい。
何？
思考誘導が残ってる。情報を引き出せないようにしてあるぞ。これは。
え？
このままだと海馬をやられる。
聞こえたか宮代君。終わりだ。切るぞ。
待ってくれ。電話切らないでくれ。
Ito screams, cut him off.
思い出せそうなんだ。もう少しで何か。
伊藤君。
伊藤、もういい、やめろ。
This is me when I try to remember things. Just kidding. But Ito didn't stop. He was trying his best, enduring terrible pain, to tell me something.
宮代、あれは確か
In the...
物質だ。
Uh-huh, I'm in there right
物
now.
質？
いつだったかわからない。俺の他にもう一人誰かがいて。
ダメだ。もうよせ。
うるさい。まだ宮代と話してんだ。切るな。
伊藤。
ゆいちゃんの仇が取れるなら、こんな頭どうなったっていい。
Even from here, I could sense his incredible determination.
聞いてるか宮代。
ああ、聞いてる。
そいつとしばらく話してて、そしたらそうだ、いきなりスマホでお前の写真を見せてきたんだ。
Huh.
僕の写真？
あれはどんな写真だったか。でも驚いたのは覚えてる。なんで驚いたのか。そうだ、宮代が楽しそうにしてたんだ。青葉寮の人たちとあんな宮代初めて見たから。
A picture from Aoba dorm? What was he talking about? There was no photos like that.
それでそうだ、そいつは笑いながら指さしたんだよ。
Yeah,
こ
who?
の子を殺せって。
Yui? It was Yui! The killer had a picture of me and Yui together.
それで俺怖くなって逃げようとしたらいきなりドアからもう一人入ってきてその二人がやめろやめてくれ何すんだよやめろ
伊藤伊藤
おい伊藤君
His mind had finally reached its limits. There was one last scream of terror and then nothing. He didn't answer no matter how many times I yelled his name. All I heard was meaningless mumbling. He didn't seem to know where he was or what he was doing anymore.
宮代君残念だがもう電話は
久里さんに代わってください。いいから早く
A moment later, Kunosato answered the phone in a cold voice.
何か用か
お願いです。伊藤を助けてください。
こいつに無理をさせたのはお前だろう今さら何を言っている
この事件が解決したら僕のこと実験台にしたっていいです。だからお願いします。
I heard a mocking laughter in her voice.
ほう今の言葉確かに聞いたぞ
やりたければ勝手にしてください。だから伊藤を。
わかったできるだけのことはしてみようただし過度の期待はするなよ
Then she hung up the phone. No matter how many times I called back, she didn't answer. Maybe one of the police officers besides Shinjo had come into the room.
伊藤
At the very end, he endured terrible pain to give me that information. Thinking back, it was incredibly important. It was a winter evening, and still there was a cold sweat forming on my forehead.
伊藤に思考誘導をかけた犯人が伊藤と一緒にこの部室に
I tried to drive my tired, exhausted mind to fit in this last piece of the puzzle.
そんなバカなそれじゃまるで真犯人が
Like, the real killer was one of us. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But that was the only hint Ito had given me. And if that hint was also...
犯人からのメッセージだとしたら
The fact that Ito had woken up right before November 4th. The fact that he'd given me that information. It all seemed like part of the killer's next move.
そっちがその気ならこっちだってやってやれ
Even if it's Ito, even if it's just what you want, I'll find you. Ito's first hint. The killer was talking with Ito in private in the newspaper club room. Which meant that it was someone close enough to Ito to have a chat like that.
しかも新聞部の部室にいてもおかしくない人物
By process of elimination, who could I rule out? Which of these people didn't I suspect? Myself. Wait, didn't? I don't know. Here. Takeru Mayashido, that's me. I know I'm not the killer. It's so silly to do that. I think. I don't know. So I can rule myself out. Yeah, we're getting somewhere. But I'd experienced how terrifying mind control could be at Cafe Lax. After that, it seemed possible that I could have been involved in the crimes and not realized it. That's right. Trust no one, not even yourself. It wasn't safe to just rule anyone out, even myself. Okay? I guess the teacher, because we don't know him much, we don't see him much. Mokai was the newspaper's club advisor. He would come by the newspaper club sometimes, and he'd probably spoken with Ito. In other words, I couldn't rule him out. Okay. Oh, wait. Talking to Ito's. Okay. No, I think all of these people know him in some way. We'll figure this out. Let's just go through the line. Yeah, I could take Kawahara off the list. He was friends with Kurisu and not that close to Ito. And because of Kurisu, he didn't like the newspaper club. It was hard to imagine the two of them talking in private here. It was probably safe to take Shinjo off the list of suspects. Ito and Shinjo had only met after I'd gotten the call. Yeah, it was safe to rule him out. Uki, probably? Yeah, I could definitely rule Uki out. There was that call from my missing phone that Ito had received. At first I thought it was her doing it, but now I'd know that Ito had done it all himself. If she and Ito were working together, there was no need for him to install that app. He could have just had Uki make the call. So I could rule her out. I'd only met Kurisato. That's right. It was after Ito had faked the call. At that point, we'd never met. Which meant it didn't match with Ito's evidence. I could eliminate her. Do I need to go through everyone, or just get all the people that would be... I could rule out Kazuki. Even when she was in the club room, she was always playing Iso too. She never spoke to anyone. Even if she was alone with Ito, she never would have talked to him. Hana, Kazuki, Uki Yamazoe, Mio Kunasato, Takeshi Shinjo, Masahi Kawahara. I could rule out these 5, which left...
そして、伊藤の言葉からさらに絞り込むなら、
そいつとしばらく話してて、そうしたら、そうだ、いきなりスマホでお前の写真を見せてきたんだ。
The killer had a picture of me, and a picture of me at Aoba dorm with Yui. There's only one picture like that I know of. If I was smiling, that meant it was a pretty old one. If nothing else, it had to be from before I left to go live by myself in the park.
そんな昔の写真を伊藤に見せることができるのは多分
There were only 3 people who could have done it. No, go there. Myself. All the old photos of myself and the people at Aoba dorm have been lost along with my cell phone at AH Tokyo General Hospital. And that phone hadn't been found yet. In other words, since I didn't have any photos like that, I wasn't the killer. For a moment, I was relieved, but then I realized my mistake. When had someone begun controlling Ito's mind? I didn't know. Maybe it was from before I dropped my phone. So it was possible that I could have shown Ito the old photo. In other words, I couldn't rule myself out. Oh, we're ruling people out. Or wait.
そんな昔の写真を伊藤に見せることができるのは多分
And then Kurisu, she also would have a picture. Kurisu would have a picture of everyone from Aoba dorm, obviously. And probably old photos of me too. Which meant she fit the criteria of the killer. Is Serika the killer?
そんな昔の写真を伊藤に見せることができるのは多分
Serika was my childhood friend. She'd known me for longer than anyone. Of course, she probably had plenty of old photos of me. And when I lived at Aoba dorm, she'd come over almost every day. She'd gotten along with everyone. Of course, she'd have a photo of Yui too. In other words, she fit the criteria for the real killer.
そして残ったのはこの3人か
I pressed my lips as I stared at the photos on the map.
この中真犯人がいる
Mhm.
クルス尾上あるいは僕ニュージェネの狂気の再来事件で能力者たちを無残に殺しユイをあんな姿に変えた犯人が
I come up with a lot of different theories, but looking back at them, they all seemed so impossible. At that point, the setting sun had disappeared beyond the artificial horizon created by the city skyline, and night was falling. How many hours were left? Until November 4th. Until November 4th began? I grabbed my bag and ran out of the room. I wanted something. Some form of unshakable evidence. Evidence providing who the killer was.
いや違うそうじゃないんだ
That's not what I wanted. What I wanted was proof that neither Kurisu, Serika, nor I was the killer.
クルス
I pushed my way through the media camps and that still crowded around the clinic and ran inside just as Uki was coming out of the exam room. She was holding Yuto's laundry and she nearly spilled it on the floor when she saw me.
タクルさん、ゆうとくん、お薬を飲んでやっと眠れたんです。だからお願いです。
ああ
そんなに慌ててののさんに何か。
大事な話なんだ今どこに
さっきまで私と一緒にゆうとくんのお世話を。今は自分のお部屋だと思います。
そうか
I reminded Uki to make sure that once the fourth began, she was never to let herself be alone. Then I headed up the stairs to the dorm.
クルスいるかクルス
I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. That was strange. If she was in the room, she should be able to answer.
入るぞ
I softly turned the doorknob. It wasn't locked. I opened the door just a little and looked inside. The lights were off and the room was pitch black.
もう寝たのか
Maybe she wasn't feeling well. She tried her best to hide it, but ever since Yui had died, she'd been a mess. She wasn't even eating much, and she'd clearly lost weight. It hurt to look at her.
なあ、大丈夫か？父さん呼んでこようか？
I spoke softly as I came inside and approached the bed.
Huh?
No one was there. She wasn't lying on the bed or the sofa or sitting at the desk.
どこ行ったんだ？あいつ。
I turned on the light, but the room was completely empty. I remembered that she'd said something about sleeping in my room before, and checked there. But it was empty too.
おい、クルス！
I didn't want to wake Yuto, but still I shouted as I ran downstairs.
ああ、先輩こんばんはっす。
Arimura was in the dining room. She was paging through a girl's magazine looking bored.
有村、すまないな。ウキのことよろしく頼む。
いやいや、私あの子の保護者じゃないっすよ。だいたい宮代先輩も狙われてるんですから、一緒にいないとダメでしょ。てか、私とウキのこと守ってくださいよ。
Arimura frowned and glared at me.
4日になったらそうする。それよりクルスを知らないか？
クルス先輩ですか？ついさっき出かけたみたいですけど。
出かけた？どうして？
I looked at the clock and it was already past 7.
さあ、慌てて出て行きましたよ。声をかけてもなんだか生返事で。
僕も出てくる。すぐに戻るから、とにかくウキを頼む。
ちょっと！だから私は保護者じゃないですって！先輩！
She screamed at me, but I ignored her and ran down the stairs. I had a terrible premonition, and my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. As I was about to exit through the clinic door, Uki poked at her poked her head out from the exam room again.
タクルさん、すみません。静かに。
そうだったな。
何かあったんですか？
いや、なんかクルスのやつが。
Then something caught my eye in the exam room. What's in there? It was Dad's computer, the one Kurisu had been using before. A pair of stereo headphones were plugged into the front audio terminal. I thought for a moment, then stopped and went into the exam room. Uki saw the look on my face and drew back a little as if she was scared.
父さんはいないのか？
昼から患者さんの往診に出ています。ここだとマスコミの方がいて診察にならないって。
じゃあこれは？
What's what? I pointed to the headphones that Uki looked troubled. She'd probably been told not to tell me. It was definitely Kurisu who'd been using them. Of course, she wouldn't need these just to browse the internet, which meant I could guess what she was doing. Just like I was today. I turned on the computer and looked at the browsing history. She either wasn't in the habit of deleting it or had been in such a hurry that she hadn't had time. The history was still there, and when I clicked, I found a site with the first video from the return of the New Generation Madness, the Don't Look at Me case. put the headphones on and pressed play. I screamed and ripped them off. The volume was so loud I thought it would blow out mere drums. Blow out mere drums. I could hear Yuto rolling around on the bed behind me, and Uki put her hand over my mouth.
ダメです。大きな声は。
I made an "I'm sorry" gesture, and then watched as the video kept playing at loud volume. That was close. I almost went deaf. Had the volume got set to maximum somehow. I quickly lowered it, then put the headphones back on and looked at the scene.
この動画を見てたんだよな、あいつは。
Uki's voice was soft. She really had been told to keep quiet about it.
これをずっと。
いえ、私その映像とっても怖くて見ないようにしてましたから。でもずっとじゃなくて何度も止めたり動かしたりしてた気がします。そうしたら何かに気づいたみたいで、突然自分の部屋に用があるからしばらくゆうとくんをお願いって。それ以上はあんまりわからないです。ごめんなさい。
Her shoulders slumped as if she was ashamed at her uselessness.
いや、ありがとな。
I nodded and told her not to worry about it.
タクル兄ちゃん。
Then I heard a frail voice.
タクル兄ちゃんでしょ。
起こしちゃったか。ごめんな。
すみません、ゆうとくん。
It was Yuto that... wait. It was Yuto. He hadn't been asleep after all.
いいんだ。
I looked over at the bed and saw that the drugs had almost put him to sleep again. He was trying his best to keep his tired eyes opened.
ね、僕、知ってる。のの姉ちゃんね、何回も同じところだけ見てたよ。マウスを使う音とイヤホンから漏れてくる音でわかった。
何回も同じところだけ。
She'd only been watching one part of the video. But why?
まさか。
What is it? No way. I stared at the computer screen. Had Kurisu found something? Some clue to the killer? Did she find something in this video?
タクル兄ちゃん。お姉ちゃんの敵を取れるかな。僕とお姉ちゃんをもう二度と会えなくした悪いやつ捕まえられるか
な。
ああ、任せとけ。僕が捕まえてやる。絶対に捕まえてやるからな。
Yuto started to cry, so I left him in Uki's care as I took the phone out of my pocket and dialed a number I knew very well. 911. I know that one very well. I grew more and more anxious with each passing ring.
クルス、どこ行ったんだよ。早く出ろよ。まさか一人で犯人のところへ行ったんじゃないだろうな。や
めろよお前。
But this was what you'd do if you found the killer first, right? I know exactly what you'd think. I suddenly felt like I heard her
い
voice.
つまでも姉貴ぶるなよ。本当は泣き虫して臆病で僕に甘えてばっかのくせに。さっさと演じしろよバカ野郎。
The only thing I heard was the endless ringing sound. November 3rd, 2015, Tuesday. You know, this seems like a good place to save and pick up for next time. Yes, yes. We'll save it on that one. We're running out of spots to save for. That's okay, because we're getting very close to the end. We're on 9. We're in the middle of 9. Maybe the middle. I don't know how far in chapter 9 we are. 9, 10, 11. Yeah, so about 3 more. Yeah, so let's see. We're gonna go ahead and pick this up next time. Well, thank you for coming and watching. Bye bye.